Chapter 2143. All the spiritual energy gathered above Arbor's head, forming a small whirlpool. Layer by layer, it absorbed all the surrounding spiritual energy into her body. The spirit division record had broken through to the 7th level, and her spiritual meridians had formed a 7th branch. Xiaomu closed her eyes and looked inside herself. She gazed at the new tiny branch meridian that had appeared in her meridians. Spiritual energy trickled into this newly formed weak branch meridian. So, other than her main meridians, she had 7 more spirit meridians than others. What did this mean? In other words, Arbor's spiritual energy was 7 to 8 times more than others at the same level. The entire mountain forest exploded with a strong light. Mo Lien, who was standing beside her and watching her level up, couldn't help but sigh helplessly. With such a huge commotion, not to mention running out of the city, even if they ran deep into the mountains and forests, they would probably be discovered by many cultivators. Sigh, how monstrous was his Jojo? Mo Lien's eyes were smiling. He stood beside Arbor and watched his little wife attentively. In the mountain forest, a cool breeze blew through his robes. Little Seven's figure suddenly appeared beside Mo Lien. Don't let anyone near here. Yes, master. Yen Qi suddenly rose into the air and turned into a golden light. He suddenly turned into a dragon and flew above the two of them. With a roar, he flew towards the practitioners coming from all directions. Holy shit, a dragon! What's going on? This mountain forest is the main road to Shuntian Prefecture. Why would a dragon appear out of nowhere? 7th Yen roared and charged toward the cultivators who were running toward them on the official road. Those people were so scared that they threw away their helmets and armor. They hurriedly turned around and ran for their lives. Oh my god! Sacred beast, it's actually an ancient sacred dragon. Oh my god! Run quickly! Sacred beast, that was a powerful existence recorded in ancient books. Who had seen it with their own eyes? Haha, they were lucky enough to see it today. Seeing everyone running over in a sorry state from afar, the other cultivators who were rushing over naturally didn't dare to say anything more. They quickly followed the crowd and ran away. What a joke! If they had to pay with their lives just to watch the show, who would dare to do so? Everyone hurriedly fled in all directions. Another burst of intense light erupted from the mountain forest, and Xiaomu's cultivation exploded from level 5 spiritual cultivator to level 6 spiritual cultivator. She could even see her spiritual sense avatar inside her dantian shaking its small hands and feet as if it were convulsing, dancing with joy. He wasn't calm at all. How could he be as calm as her? If this spiritual sense body was released, wouldn't it be a funny existence in the eyes of others? It was too embarrassing for her. Mo Lien raised her head to take a look. The ground around her was slowly sinking due to the vibrations caused by the spiritual aura. The trees next to her were falling down one after another with creaking sounds. His wife's advancement this time was too fierce. Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. With a wave of her hand, a jade communication talisman appeared in her hand. Jichen, 10 li outside of the city, Jojo is advancing. Take some people and stop all the people who are rushing over here. Looking at the situation, it would take a few days for his little wife to advance. Prince Mo calmed himself down and found a stone stool to sit beside his wife. Separated by the transparent defensive barrier, his eyes were fixated on her body. What should she do? She had only just advanced in the spiritual realm and she had already caused such a big commotion. Chapter 2144. In the future, if she were to ascend to the immortal realm, she would have to go through the 5 spirits reincarnation trial. If the heavenly Tao would be furious and kill this little demon in front of her. Mo Lien supported her chin with her hand and tilted her head slightly as she stared intently at the little girl. At this moment, it was as if the wind had stopped. Everything around them seemed to turn illusory, and time seemed to be frozen here in his phoenix eyes. In his line of sight, there was only her. 7 days later, the little girl opened her slightly dazed eyes and jumped up. She immediately saw a handsome man outside the defensive barrier, his green robes fluttering in the wind and a slight smile on his lips. Lien. With a wave of his finger, Lien removed the defensive boundary around her and teleported to her front. He stretched out his arms and pulled her tightly into his embrace. Sighing softly, he raised his palm to caress her a few times. "My Jojo, your husband has missed you so much." The little girl moved her head in his water and extended a small fist. She clenched it and cheered, "Lien, I feel like my entire body is filled with great power." "TSK, little fellow, you've ascended 3 levels in a single bound. Of course you're filled with great power now." Ji Chen sighed softly. The two of them looked back and saw Ji Chen, little Taisui, Dao Wuji, and the others slowly walking over. Arbor hurriedly checked her cultivation, and her eyes immediately lit up. "I've ascended." Lien couldn't help but laugh. "You've been in seclusion for 7 days. It's not as simple as ascending. Your spiritual sense has also grown quite a bit." Arbor looked again and nodded. "I've become a 7th rank spirit master. My spiritual sense has also grown quite a bit." Most importantly, she had broken through to the 7th level of the soul chapter. Now she could cultivate her 7th branch meridian. At this moment, she felt that her body was filled with spiritual power and was very powerful. Lien looked at her with a gentle gaze and nodded. This ascension went quite smoothly. "Let's go back first." Arbor grunted and turned to look at Ji Chen and the others. "Why is everyone here? How can we not come? You've caused such a big commotion and attracted many people to investigate. Fortunately, we acted in time and helped you block all those random people. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to live such a peaceful life these past 7 days." Arbor nodded in realization. "Thank you for your help. Let's go back first." With a wave of his hand, he brought out several vigorous horses from Paradise Planet. He used it as a means of transportation. Everyone wanted to return to the city in a low-key manner so that they wouldn't attract too much attention while riding the dragon and phoenix. Who would have thought that this group of men and women would be eye-catching to begin with? As a result, when they entered the city, they attracted the attention of many young men and women. With the city gate completely blocked off, Lien's party ultimately had no choice but to abandon their horses and scurry onto the roofs, fleeing in defeat by leaping onto eaves and vaulting over walls. When they returned to the inn, everyone saw that Hu Jinshan's sleeves had been pulled off by 2 young ladies who were like wolves and tigers. They couldn't help but point at him and laugh loudly. Miss Chiao was baffled. What were those people doing on the street just now? The corner of Lien's mouth twitched secretly. As he spoke, he lifted his sleeve to wipe Lien's cheek. "That aunt just now spoke so loudly and looked so agitated. Her saliva almost sprayed on your face. So dirty. Did you hear what she said clearly?" Everyone. Chapter 2145. "Jojo, you don't know why they're chasing us?" Dao Wuji felt that there was a need to discuss this issue with his sister-in-law. He kept feeling that boss seemed to be very bitter about chasing his wife from afar. Arbor glanced askance at him and gazed at him with a "Are you an idiot?" expression. "How could I not know? They're chasing me because they want to rob me, of course." Everyone. Lien couldn't help but facepalm. She suddenly recalled the incident with the 4th princess. It was the same trick with different people, but the little fellow always thought that they were chasing her for the sake of robbing her. That was why she beat up the 4th princess, Mo Shuang, back then. So shouldn't those passers-by thank themselves that they were actually weaklings that Jojo couldn't be bothered to lay a hand on them? Isn't it because we're beautiful? The peony fairy couldn't resist teasing. Arbor blinked and turned to look at Lien. He asked with a frown, "Just like how Mo Shuang chased after eldest Qin back then? And like how a flock of orioles and swallows chased after Omega Kotoku?" She recalled that when she first applied to enter the Qin estate, she also encountered a bunch of mentally abnormal people who chased after Omega Kotoku and screamed crazily. They were simply sick. "This type of person is sick," Arbor said expressionlessly. "According to the liver meridian, depression or sudden mental stimulation are abnormal emotional problems. The liver meridian will block meridian qi, and ultimately, the virus will invade the entire body." Everyone. Haha, everyone laughed like idiots. but they still looked at Prince Mo sympathetically. Brother, you've worked hard. It wasn't easy chasing after the crown princess, right? He must have accumulated several lifetimes worth of good fortune to be able to chase the stoic face home. The little stoic's train of thought was truly amazing. In her opinion, the reason why she chased after the beautiful men was because she was mentally stimulated, her liver was blocked, and she was in pain. Everyone laughed so hard that their teeth were visible. The little stoic was expressionless. She didn't know what was so funny. As a result, the group of people laughed and laughed, but when they saw the stoic face above them, they inexplicably couldn't continue laughing. Arbor glanced at Hujetchen and the others, then silently turned around and walked upstairs. Follow me. Everyone rubbed their noses speechlessly, nodded, and followed her to the second floor. After entering the room, Arbor turned to Emolien and said, "Husband." Emolien nodded knowingly. A layer of defensive enchantment fell down and covered the entire room. Little Tai Sui then flicked its finger to reinforce the defensive barrier on top of it. Hence, Xiao Mu had the sapling drag everyone inside. As soon as they entered Paradise Planet, Arbor didn't have time to explain anything to everyone. Arbor's eyes lit up as he rushed towards a little tray ant. That's right, Qiuqiu had consumed the profound spirit jade for a long time and absorbed the entire spirit realm on the island. 7 days ago, it had fused with the seed fragment and finally awakened. Furthermore, it had entered the early stages of growth. The little tray ant also waved its branches and excitedly ran towards its master. The adorable little tray ant widened its round, bean-like eyes, and tears were about to flow out. It raised its arms and ran towards Arbor while shouting, "Master, Master, I want a hug." Smack. A smack landed on the little Trent's head. Qiuqiu tilted its head in bewilderment and looked at its little master. After not seeing him for so long, shouldn't Master be hugging and kissing him? Chapter 2146. Why did this scene feel completely different from what he had imagined? Qiuqiu thought that Master would definitely hug Qiuqiu happily after not seeing him for so long. Not to mention kissing him, but at least caressing him a little. What the hell was going on? Why was he beaten up by Master? The little tray ant waved his branches and scurried away. Arbor chased after him for a few steps. Don't run. Who told you to act on your own? Stop right there. Xiao Mu leaped up and landed in front of the tray ant Qiuqiu, her small face looking at him in a huff. Qiuqiu called her weakly and subconsciously took 2 steps back. He said pitifully, "Qiuqiu is confident that I can recover on my own." Confident my ass. Arbor glared at a certain tree and asked angrily, "Let me ask you, what were you thinking at that time? Did you think that by sacrificing a little, you could fulfill my wish? If something really happened to you, how could I live with peace of mind for the rest of my life? Do you want me to die of regret, anger, and resentment?" When Xiaomu recalled how she had helplessly watched this tree turn into withered branches and withered leaves in front of her back then, she was so angry that she could not vent her anger. She had really panicked then. This damn tree actually didn't tell her anything and directly acted on its own initiative. Qiuqiu had a stuttering expression on his face. His black bean-like eyes darted around, not daring to look at Arbor. After a long while, he finally admitted his mistake with an honest expression. He muttered to himself and said softly, "Master, Qiuqiu knows his mistake. Master, don't be angry." "Come here," Arbor roared at him. The little tray ant had the urge to run back, but in the end he braced himself and moved to Arbor's side. Arbor looked at him helplessly, sighed, and picked him up. Flicking a few tender leaves on his head, Arbor said softly, "Qiuqiu, don't be so impulsive in the future. If there's anything in the future, discuss it with me first. Don't act on your own." Qiuqiu naturally nodded his head 101,000 times. However, in the depths of his heart, he was still very determined. If little Master is in danger, of course Qiuqiu will use all means to protect her. Sigh, girls are so troublesome. He was at his wits' end now that she was crying to him. Arbor looked at the tree in his arms expressionlessly. "What are you thinking about?" His expression was strange. It didn't seem like he was thinking of anything good. Chiu, who was in a fugue state, quickly regained his senses, his black eyes rolling around the tree trunk. He suddenly acted cute and changed the topic stiffly. Master Silver, do you know? Ever since our paradise planet was promoted to a spirit realm, the spirit realm has become a spirit realm. Hee, the production of spirit tea will double. I collect tea every half a month. I've already accumulated a lot of spirit tea. Master, do you want Chiu to brew some tea? Master, would you like some tea? He forcefully changed the topic. Arbor looked down at him speechlessly, shook his head, and patted his tree head. Chiu, I want you to promise me that you'll be good in the future. The little tree revealed a very touched expression and said, Don't worry, Master, Chiu will definitely be very good. Arbor touched his leaves and looked him up and down. Have you entered the growth stage now? Yes. Chapter 2147. Chiu nodded furiously, a happy expression on its tree-like face. Master Silver, isn't Chiu very good? Chiu has officially entered the early stage of growth. Arbor nodded and looked around. Before she had entered, she had already felt that Paradise Planet, Fish Orchid Planet, and Chuyun Planet had all expanded quite a bit. Now that she had entered Paradise Planet, it was indeed so. Chiu, let's go take a look at the 100 Herb Garden. Arbor waved at Lien and the others. I'll go pick some things in the herb garden first. You guys play for a while. Lien nodded slightly, indicating that she understood. As for Dao Wuji and the others, they had already run off somewhere with curious expressions. I don't want to go out anymore. It'll be great to stay here and cultivate in seclusion. Peony Fairy said with a soft sigh as she flicked her slender fingernails seductively. Big sister, little sister has the same intention, Ginkgo Fairy hurriedly said. When they had entered, they had felt a dense wave of spirit energy rush towards them. Thinking that Yang Shirong and the others had found a place with an extremely fast flow of time and excellent feng shui for cultivation, they had really hit the jackpot. Their realms would definitely soar during this period of time, right? Ginkgo Fairy also looked forward to it. There were many mundane matters outside, but they didn't have to care about anything here. How great would that be? The little fellow had already run back with a face full of excitement, holding a bunch of herbs in his hand. Hearing the sister's words, he hurriedly shook his head and said, With your cultivation, I'm afraid there's not much use for you to cultivate here. At the very least, the spirit domain had to be promoted to the god realm. Only then would it be suitable for people above the spirit supreme realm like them to cultivate. It's fine. The main thing is that it's quiet. Ginkgo Fairy giggled, her gaze fixed on the herbs in her hand. Finished picking? Arbor nodded, then ran to Lien's side and said happily, My herb garden has more than doubled in size, and there are more fields. I had Little Tree collect all the herbs I bought from Liangyuan Medicine Store. Chiu was indeed a very hard-working child, helping her organize the medicinal herbs by category. Apart from the low-grade medicinal herbs that were not planted, there were many types of medicinal herbs from mid-grade to saint-grade medicinal herbs in the herb garden. However, there was also a lot of empty space. If they encountered any rare herbs in the future, they could continue to plant them. Just now, when she looked at the flourishing appearance of the entire medicinal garden, she was in a very happy mood. Seeing her happy expression, Lien was also very happy. She raised her hand to hold her little hand and said with a smile, Do you still want to go to the beach to take a look? Arbor shook his head. Let's not disturb Second Martial Ant and the others' cultivation. Let's go out. After everyone came out of Paradise Planet, they ate some food before returning to their rooms to rest. Lien saw her take out the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron and knew that she was about to start concocting pills. She stood up and said, Remember not to stay up too late. Arbor nodded and watched him leave. He tilted his head and was just about to start refining the spirit-gathering pill when the door to the room was pushed open. Chow. Fairy Yellow Crane hurriedly stepped through the door. Where did you go? Have you eaten? Arbor had washed his hands clean and was about to start when he saw Yellow Crane Fairy come in. He could not help but ask curiously, I went to the streets to ask around and ate a little, Yellow Crane Fairy said dejectedly. I didn't expect everything to go smoothly in the main residence. It's as if nothing happened at all. Chapter 2148. Chasing her own disciple through the night and killing 2 maidservants. Such a big matter, yet there was not the slightest bit of news. Fairy Yellow Crane said dejectedly, she's really amazing, smoothing out everything. Hearing this, Arbor couldn't help but raise her hand to pat her head. Yellow Crane, don't be discouraged. After a pause, she looked at her seriously and asked, but your master, she's doomed to self-destruction for doing evil. If there comes a day when I want to find trouble with her. Fairy Yellow Crane drooped her head and sighed softly. I know. Arbor walked in front of her and pulled her to sit down. There's something you probably don't know yet. The reason why there are corpse puppets running rampant in the world is not a coincidence, but someone deliberately did it. The organization behind all this is called Heavenly Fate. The brainless people in the organization may be spread all over the world. Arbor held Yellow Crane's hand and said, what we can confirm now is, your master, Feng Shi, and Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord, Gung Pengcheng, are all members of Heavenly Fate. However, the current Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord, Gung Pengcheng, has already been replaced by our people. Yellow Crane listened silently, and suddenly widened her eyes. Prefecture Lord Gung? He's one of you. The little fellow nodded her little head proudly. There's no longer any Prefecture Lord Gung in the world. That old fellow. Thinking about how that dog still wanted to trick her even in death and refused to reveal the name of the mastermind behind the Mu family, Arbor couldn't help but frown slightly. Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord is one of us now. His name is Dunji. Arbor said, I'll inform you that if you see this Prefecture Lord's strange actions in the future, you don't have to make a fuss. Fairy Yellow Crane silently closed her gaping mouth, feeling that this matter was rather miraculous. Jojo and the others were really resourceful people. They could even deal with Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord. Then does my master know? She doesn't know. Arbor shook her head, then pondered for a moment and said, actually, I can't be sure. Maybe your master is a clever person and has already seen through all of this. It's not impossible. Huang He nodded and said indifferently, yes, she is indeed intelligent. Then he smiled bitterly. Even my disciple doesn't know what she's thinking in the depths of her heart. How could she be so ruthless as to turn her own disciple into a strange corpse puppet? Huang He, maybe she wants to make you stronger so that she can use you? Fairy Yellow Crane was stunned for a moment before nodding. That was indeed what she said back then. She even said that Senior Sister was useless. However, she had single-handedly controlled Senior Sister Lingfei and turned her into a monster. How could she blame Senior Sister Lingfei for being useless? What kind of logic is this? Arbor sneered. The Heavenly Fate cult has always been dedicated to researching drugs that can change the human body. In the beginning, this medicine only worked on corpses. Now, it can even work on living bodies. This shows that it has improved a lot. Fairy Yellow Crane's body trembled slightly. I still don't quite understand. It's simple. This improved medicine is spread by the night cowbirds. Once the human body touches it, it will automatically enter your bones and blood. From the beginning of the mutation of corpses to the current mutation of living bodies, it's all for one purpose, to give birth to powerhouses with special abilities. Succeed or die trying. Arbor's grip on Huang He's hand tightened slightly. Chapter 2149. This kind of medicine can make the human body stronger. Once it's eliminated, it'll turn into a monster that's neither human nor ghost. Madame Feng's words kept echoing in Fairy Yellow He's ears. Only now did she come to a realization. Her voice trembled as she asked, Tis? This is a 50-50 chance? How can there be a 50-50 chance of success? Look at how many zombies there are in the world. How many special ability users can there be? So, the chance is actually only 1 in 10. Fairy Yellow He asked in shock and anger. 1 in 10? I'm afraid that's overestimating it. Arbor sighed. He understood why Fairy Yellow he was so angry. Her master, who was so close to her, was sending her disciple to her death for this 1 in 10 chance. This kind of feeling was very terrible. Fairy Yellow he silently lowered her head and laughed bitterly. Sure enough, if you're not ruthless, you can't achieve great things. Arbor held her hand. Everything is in the past. But what I want to tell you is that Tian Yun and I can't coexist. So one day, we'll definitely go to war with your master. And that day was probably coming soon. Fairy Yellow he raised her head and looked at her with a determined gaze. Madame Feng is no longer my master. That night, she cut off our master-disciple relationship with her own hands. How can I still acknowledge someone who wants to kill me as my master? Fairy Yellow he said softly. I can't do it. Don't worry, Jojo. I won't be a burden to our team. When it comes to my firm stance, I won't miss a single point. Arbor pursed his lips and nodded. He patted Fairy Yellow he's shoulder lightly and said in a relaxed tone, I'm going to refine the spirit-gathering pill. Do you want to watch from the side? Yes. When she was downstairs, she had heard Fairy Ginkgo mention that Xiao Xiao was refining pills upstairs. That was why she had hurriedly rushed up. She couldn't miss such a good opportunity to watch him refine pills. Jojo, you can refine black-level pills now? Arbor nodded. Yes, I can occasionally refine a few earth-level pills. But it's not very stable. Wow! Fairy Yellow Crane had an expression of worship on her face. She hurriedly stood up, walked to her side, and circled around the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. I am now a black-grade alchemist. Jojo, what about you? Since you can refine earth-grade medicinal pills, then you must be an earth-grade alchemist. I don't know. Arbor said with a confused face, I can only refine a few earth-level pills from time to time. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. They can only be considered as profound-level pills. Huang he stopped in his tracks, blinking as he stared at her and asked, could it be that you've never gone to the pill house to appraise your alchemist rank? Arbor shook his head in confusion. Do I need to appraise it? Huang he's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as he stammered, Of course, we have to appraise it. If you don't appraise it, how would the world know that Shuntian Prefecture has another earth-grade alchemist? After the appraisal, even if I go to the upper 3 prefectures in the future, I can get a 50% discount when I go to the pill house to buy medicinal herbs. Why didn't you say so earlier? Arbor patted his chest with a pained expression. Previously, I went to the medicine shop on the street to buy a lot of medicinal herbs. Lotus flowers cost tens of millions of spirit coins. Huang he. When we alchemists go to the pill house to buy things, the higher the rank of the alchemist, the greater the discount. You didn't know? Chapter 2150. How could I possibly know? Huang he, that you're blaming me for being uncultured? But now I know. Arbor reached out and took a medicinal herb, grinding it in his hands. But I've already spent an astronomical price to buy a bunch of medicinal herbs. Huang he could not help but laugh. It's fine, Prince Imo has money. Even if he had money, this was not how he should spend it. Thinking that if he went to the pill house to buy the herbs, the price would be reduced by half, Jojo felt like his heart was bleeding. The two refined in the room for an entire afternoon. Huang he was naturally in awe of Qiao Mu's pill refining speed. This little guy could actually refine several cauldrons of spirit-gathering pills in one afternoon, and even refined quite a lot of spirit-returning medicinal liquid. After seeing Jojo's refining speed, he was definitely going to be devastated. Huang he was very depressed and did not recover for a long time. It was all because Qiaonan was too fierce. The two came out of the room at 10 in the evening. Huang he held a small box in her hand, immersed in the scene of refining pills just now, unable to pull herself out. While eating, she was somewhat absent-minded. Seeing her intoxicated look, everyone could not be bothered to disturb her. They saw her stuffing food into her mouth from time to time, looking like she was in a daze. Arbor could not help but feel a little helpless. He raised his hand and patted Huang he's shoulder. Eat properly. She was almost swallowing the spoon. Fairy Huang he was in a daze for a while, and was awakened by Arbor's pat. She came back to her senses and looked at everyone. Only then did she realize that she was sitting in front of a dining table made up of 2 long tables. Fairy Huang He revealed a strange expression. Eat already? Everyone was speechless for a moment. Fairy Ginkgo giggles. You're so silly. Eat properly, don't think about refining pills. Huang He's face was full of yearning. I learned a lot from Jojo's refining process today. I have to quickly finish eating and return to my room to meditate. As she spoke, Huang He had already quickly pulled out the rice in her bowl. Everyone. Jojo, how do you feel after advancing? All right. Fairy Yellow Crane turned to look at her. I forgot to ask you. I heard from Sister Ginkgo that you actually spent 7 days advancing outside Shantian City. She looked her up and down. I can't tell what realm you're in. Are you a level 5 spiritual master now? Huang He, let me tell you some shocking news. He Chen unhurriedly opened the fan in his hand and said with a smile, our Jojo has been promoted to a level 7 soul master. Huang He's mouthful of rice was all sprayed on the transparent barrier that had suddenly erected in front of her. Everyone was speechless. Don't you think this venerable peach blossom immortal is so mean? He knew that it would agitate the little girl, yet he still told her. At the same time, he had already set up a barrier in front of Huang He, allowing her to spout whatever she wanted. Ha! The peony fairy laughed so hard that she held her belly. Oh, don't make me laugh to death. You can inherit my fields. Huang He hurriedly wiped his mouth and looked at Arbor in disbelief. You actually leaped to the 7th rank all of a sudden? Such a ferocious advancement speed made people feel very scared. Arbor couldn't help but look helpless. Occasionally. Hearing that, Huang He breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. If you constantly advance like this, wouldn't you be ascending to the heavens? Everyone couldn't help but laugh, looking at Little Yellow Crane with a strange expression. Little Yellow Crane was really an honest person. Chapter 2151. She would definitely know in the future that Jojo's occasionally today was full of mysteries. Alright, hurry up and eat. Rest early after eating. Arbor held up her bowl and called out to everyone. She had been in seclusion for a few days, so she needed a good rest. Nightfall. Arbor turned over on the bed and subconsciously reached out to hug Emo Lien who was lying beside her. But when she hugged nothing, she woke up with a start. Blinking her large eyes in the dark, Miss Chiao wrinkled her small nose and rubbed her eyes. She pulled the corner of the blanket and sat up. The room was very quiet. Where did that guy Emo Lien go in the middle of the night? He left his wife behind and ran off by himself. Miss Chiao wrinkled her small face in displeasure and jumped off the bed barefoot. Her expression was somewhat dazed as she looked at the pitch-black night. Dong! A small pebble wrapped in a small piece of paper was suddenly thrown in from the window and rolled to Arbor's side. Arbor squatted down to pick it up. There were only 2 lines of small characters written on it, and only a few words. Follow me. Yi Lingmin. Arbor slightly raised her eyebrows. Yi Lingmin, this girl, still dared to come in front of her to make her presence known? Thinking of this, she put on an emerald green outer garment, tidied up her clothes, and casually tied her hair into a loose bun. With a whoosh, she shot out of the window. At the same time, Emo Lien was standing outside Shantian City. Her handsome face was cold as she stared at 3 or 4 black-clothed men kneeling in front of her with one knee on the ground. Your Highness, His Majesty has already issued 7 secret orders. He has ordered people from the forest guard to come and bring your Highness back. Tong's expression was somewhat fearful as he spoke. This subordinate doesn't know what to do. The forest guard Captain Fong Su is an extremely old-fashioned person. He takes His Majesty's orders as his priority. Once he receives the order, he will definitely spare no effort to capture your Highness. Emo Lien was silent as she stared at him. What's the hurry? Once this matter is over, I will naturally leave. Then, how should I reply to Captain Fong? Just tell him that it will take at most half a month. Emo Lien paused for a moment. About 20 days. Don't worry, I will go back. He still had to go back and cause trouble for the great emperor of the divine land. The old man nagged him every day, asking him to go back, go back, go back. Then he would let him have his way. Tong inexplicably shook his small body. He felt that the crown prince's gaze was very strange. What should he do? It was as if she wasn't going back to spend time with the great emperor. Instead, she was going there to cause trouble. That's enough. Emolienne waved her hand. You guys go and stabilize the Greenwood guards. As for the future, I will deal with it myself. Your Highness. They received the order and quickly disappeared into the night. Emolienne looked up at the pitch-black night sky and harumphed lightly. Old man, I wonder if you're prepared for bad luck? Emolienne turned and left, leaving only a wisp of cool breeze scattered under the stars in the dark night. When he returned to the inside room and walked into the room, he was slightly startled. He hurried to the bedside to take a look, and his handsome face immediately changed. His wife was missing? Dong dong bang, bang. Hu Shurchen opened his sleepy eyes in a daze. Before he could speak, he felt his collar being pulled up. Where's Jojo? Hu Shurchen. What's wrong with you? You're sleeping in the middle of the night and asking me for my wife. You didn't steal her? Steal your sister? Hu Shurchen looked at him speechlessly. Chapter 2152. He forcefully pushed his 5 fingers away and smoothed out the creases on his clothes. Big brother, shouldn't you be looking for where your wife went missing now? When I left, Jojo was still sleeping very soundly. Hechen was speechless. Can't she sleep until the middle of the night? Suddenly wake up? Emolienne frowned. Where could she have gone? Yuan Shurchen rolled her eyes and slowly took out a green vine from her sleeve. Sapling, where did your master go? The little tree did not respond. Hechen waved at Emolienne, who looked upset. Give me some fire. Whoosh. A purple flame lit up between Emolienne's fingers. Just as he got close to the vine, he heard Chiochio's squeak. Take it away, take it away. Annoying. Stinky fire. Hechen reached out to touch the little tree's vine. Are you willing to tell me now? You're extorting a confession. Chiochio said angrily. I won't tell you even if I die. I won't hesitate to go through a mountain of swords or a sea of fire for my master. It's just a little fire, it won't scare me. Wawa. Take it away, take it away. So annoying, isn't that holy fire? It hated holy lightning the most in its life, followed by holy fire. Annoying, annoying, annoying. What if it burns my beautiful skin? Master, sob sob sob. These 2 men are forcing me. Sob 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 sob. I'll tell master. Chiochio cried pitifully. You're bullying me when master isn't here. Hechen smiled very gently. Chiochio, are you going to tell me now? Sob sob sob. I won't submit to force. Chiochio wasn't born to be afraid of death. It's so itchy, don't burn Chiochio. A vine twisted in Hechen's hand and said, You stop. Annoying. Master has been lured away by Yi Lingmin. Emolienne's expression immediately turned ugly. She flicked the vine with her finger. Where did you go? Chiochio was being so secretive and unwilling to say anything. He felt that there was something fishy going on. Strange. Ma Yingchen chuckled and opened her fan. She blinked and said, I advise you to be honest. Otherwise, I'll throw you into the manure pit later. Chiochio immediately wilted. When these 2 unscrupulous people got together, they could think of anything. Master Silver went to the spring house. What? The 2 men yelled at him. What kind of lousy name was that? It didn't sound like a good place at all. Chiochio didn't dare to make a sound after being yelled at. It silently lit a candle for its little master in its heart. Let's just say that running around with Yi Lingmin in the middle of the night instead of sleeping was really an unwise move. She went in now? Chiochio had only pretended to be dead for a short while when Emolienne picked it up and gave it a light swing. You can choose. Tell me now or I'll roast you first. Woo woo woo. Master Silver, Master Silver. This man's terrifying true colors had been exposed. Seeing that Prince Emo was about to act impatiently, Chiochio hurriedly said, She's at the door. She's at the door. Crown Prince, if you don't hurry over now, who knows? But this spring house is so bustling. There are so many pretty boys inside, tsk. Wow, the male silver at the door welcoming our little Master Silver is so beautiful. Prince Mo! Exclamation point. Heechin. Chapter 2153. Shut up. Mo Lien gripped the vine tightly. Wah, don't break me. This is a vine clone that I painstakingly cultivated. Prince Mo threw away the noisy vine and went out the window. The corners of Ma Shurchin's mouth twitched. She reached out to take the vine and caressed it. Chio, if you dare to leak the news, ha. Chio felt a chill run down his spine. Master Ma Shurchin, I'm already asleep. Good night. Chio greeted the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal obediently and then fell silent. The latter found it funny. Seeing that Chio was tactful, he didn't continue. He hurriedly opened the door and left quickly with Mo Lien. Arbor didn't know that Mo Lien and Ma Shurchin had already found out about her escape in the middle of the night. Along the way, she followed Yi Lingmin's graceful back view and chased after her. She turned a corner and chased into a bustling street filled with the fragrance of cosmetics. Xiao Mu also did not expect that while she was chasing after them, red lanterns were hung high on this street, and there were many young ladies and young men standing at the entrance. It looked like business was very good. Arbor didn't chase after Yi Lingmin with all her might. Seeing that she seemed to have lured her here, she couldn't help but feel curious. She thought of what Yi Lingmin had said earlier. Yi Lingmin's shadow suddenly jumped onto a wall and disappeared behind the tall brothel. Xiao Mu trotted up the steps and chased after him for a few steps before suddenly stopping. They saw a man in a white robe with a delicate and pretty face. He was like a noble young master that was free from dust under the snow. He was talking cheerfully and wittily, and he was smiling with his eyes narrowed as he invited a few covetous men to enter and have some fun. Arbor was expressionless. A young lady is here. The men at the entrance were all dressed to the nines. That's right, it's just plain flowers of all colors, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and purple. Xiao Mu didn't look sideways as she trotted to the white-robed man's side. She peeked at him before walking inside without saying a word. A fiery red feather fan suddenly blocked Arbor's path. The first thing that entered his eyes was a fair and tender left leg. She was wearing a fiery red short jacket, which revealed her white leg in a very fashionable fashion. What a strange outfit. Seriously. It stung the eyes. Arbor! Exclamation point. Aya, little girl, do your parents know that you've come to our spring house for a stroll? Arbor glanced at the man in red. His taste in clothes was so much worse than rotten peach blossoms that her looks were not bad, but it was a pity that she was painted like a flirtatious slut. She felt dizzy just looking at him. Everyone didn't know that in the little stoic's eyes, this row of red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, and purple had automatically been replaced with green peacock, scarlet chicken, yellow lantern grass, blue phoenix flower, and other exotic medicinal herbs and beasts. She automatically filtered out these men out of habit. She bypassed the man in red and continued to stride inside. Everyone couldn't help but be astonished. The man in blue hastily blocked her path again. Little girl, we're asking you a question. Did you come with an adult? We're operating a legitimate business. If you come out to play without an adult's knowledge, don't let someone come and smash our brothel. So long-winded, Jojo reprimanded in displeasure. Chapter 2154. A plump landlord walked over from the side and cast a sidelong glance at the little girl. He stuck out his big belly and laughed heartily. You haven't even grown all your hair yet? Yet you dare to seek pleasure. Nothing is too strange these days. After saying that, he took out a handful of spirit coins, about 20 to 30 of them, and tossed them to the white-robed man beside him. He looked at the green-robed man lecherously and said, "Green, let's go." Aya, landlord who, you're joking again, aren't you? I'm one of the spring house's 10 great handsome men. After saying the first half of his words, the green-robed man's handsome face darkened, and he snorted. Those 20 to 30 spirit coins aren't even enough to treat me to a cup of tea. Slut. The landlord was humiliated, and he angrily stormed inside with a flick of his sleeves. What a joke, he had spent 20 to 30 spirit coins. At the very least, he could find a slightly low-end handsome man to touch. Arbor looked at the landlord who walked in, then looked at the smiling white-robed man beside him. He suddenly raised his hand, took out a large bag of spirit coins from his pocket, and directly stuffed it into the white-robed man's hand. That green-robed man immediately surrounded him, wanting to inspect the bag of spirit coins. The white-robed man pressed down on his hand and said softly with a chuckle, "Xiao Lu, don't be rude." Then he turned to Arbor and said, "Miss, please come inside." As expected, one had to pay to enter. The little stoic nodded pensively and walked towards the House of Spring. Bah, a young lady actually doesn't learn the good things and imitates those trashy people to whore men. When Xiao Mu heard the sound, she turned around and saw a red-painted and green-painted old procuress standing in front of her red apricot house. She was currently in front of her red apricot house, snacking on melon seeds as she started cursing. Arbor was baffled. He didn't feel like paying attention to this old fellow and stepped into the spring house. At this time, two plain-clothed men were performing a dance on a stage on the first floor of the house. A crowd of idiots surrounded the stage and repeatedly cheered. From time to time, someone would toss spirit coins onto the stage. Xiao Mu instantly creased her brows. Those people had completely blocked the road ahead. She still had to go to the second floor to take a look. "Little girl, would you like to order a green sign later?" The green-clothed man changed his previous attitude of disdain and ridicule towards the landlord and followed Arbor like a little bird. Scram. "Don't pretend to be pitiful." The man in blue hurriedly pushed him away and said to Arbor with a smile, point at me, point at me. I'm called Lawning." Arbor looked at them expressionlessly. At this moment, the dance on the stage stopped, eliciting cheers and thunderous applause from the audience. Someone shouted, "Wow, young Master Song Fong is here." Everyone quickly turned around and looked at the 8 handsome men beside Arbor in a daze. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and white. Arbor stepped forward. From time to time, a group of handsome young men's cries of surprise could be heard. Such a young female guest came to our house. She seems to have facial paralysis. She doesn't have any expression. Wow. She was escorted in by young Master Song Fong and the 7 handsome men. I wonder what her background is. She looks so delicate. Turn around. A woman with a square face angrily turned her male companion's face back. What are you looking at? What's there to see? Chapter 2155. Of course, the little girl was pretty. As soon as she entered the room, she attracted the attention of many people. Arbor didn't pay attention to other people's expressions. She glanced around the hall and suddenly saw Yi Lingmin's figure in front of the railing on the second floor. Halt! Xiao Mu was enraged. She gave up a good sleep and walked around with this woman for a long time. She still didn't know what she wanted to do. Arbor flew forward and frowned when she saw a group of people blocking the way. She lowered her head and rummaged through her pocket. She took out a large handful of spirit coins and threw them all at the corner. As a result, the scene immediately became chaotic. Everyone cried out in alarm and rushed toward the spirit coins on the ground. A path was cleared in front of her. Arbor's figure flashed and went to the second floor. She kicked open a door without saying anything. Fuck, it stung her eyes. When she kicked open the door, she saw a woman in a red tutu standing in the room and turning around with a small leather whip. The woman was petrified when she saw her. Arbor was also petrified when she saw the woman. There was a pitiful little beautiful man crying in the corner of the bed. He was looking at her with pitiful eyes like a puppy begging for pity. That white-robed man, the young Sir Song Fong that everyone spoke of as peerlessly handsome, hastily walked up. His mouth twitched inwardly as he dragged Xiao Mu out and closed the door behind him. Fan Meng, Fan Yu, accompany this little girl to sit in the wing room. Yes, young master. Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple walked out. They were very good-looking, but Jojo couldn't remember them. Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple stared at the two men with jealousy. Green Peacock shouted angrily, "Young master, I don't agree. Every time there's a good thing, you always entrust it to Fan Meng and Fan Yu. Are they raised by a mother and we are born by a concubine?" Young Master Song Feng glanced at him and said, "Little Green, you talk too much." Green Peacock stopped talking. He suppressed the anger in his heart and glared at Fan Meng and Fan Yu. Arbor frowned. He wanted to refuse. Why would he enter a room and sit down? But now that he thought about it, he wondered if these people knew Yi Lingmin. That fellow must have lured her here for a reason. As soon as they entered the room, Fan Meng and Fan Yu washed their hands and burned incense. One of them boiled some fragrant tea for her, while the other took a zither and sat down. Arbor waved his hand. "Don't bother. All of you, sit down. Don't do anything." The two of them looked at each other and obediently sat down in front of the little stoic. "Let me ask you too, have you heard of Yi Lingmin's name?" The two of them looked confused and shook their heads at the same time. Arbor frowned and asked, "You've never heard of it?" "Miss, this Miss Yi Lingmin you're looking for, could she be one of our guests?" But the guests usually don't reveal their names to us." Arbor glanced at the two of them. Fan Meng hurriedly said, "Miss, do you want to drink wine or tea?" "No need." It was the middle of the night and they were drinking tea. Did they still want to go home and sleep? Senseless. Could it be that Yi Lingmin had nothing better to do and was toying with her? Arbor stood up in a huff. "Go home." Fan Yu stood up in a panic and hastily ran to block the door. He looked at her pleadingly. "Miss, could you please wait for 5 minutes before leaving?" Chapter 2156. If Miss leaves now, I, Fan Meng and I will be regarded as inconsiderate guests. We'll be blacklisted by the brothel and will be severely punished. Arbor blinked, took out a bag of spirit coins from his pocket, and threw it at them. "You just want money, right? All right, get out of the way." Fan Yu stood pitifully by the door, hugging the bag of spirit coins without saying a word, and his head hung low. "Hello." Arbor put his two little paws behind his back and tilted his head to look at her. She saw that kid raise his head, and his eyes were full of pitiful tears. He looked like he was bullied by her, but also a bit humiliated. Thinking of her impatient attitude when she spoke before, it seemed that she was indeed a bit disrespectful. Arbor coughed lightly, walked to the table and sat down. He said expressionlessly, all right. Serve the tea. Leave after the time it takes to burn a stick of incense." This restaurant was really baffling. It actually had such a strange rule that customers had to stay here for the time it takes to burn a stick of incense. Could it be that customers couldn't leave if the tea wasn't good? Instead of focusing on the quality of the dishes, they had to resort to unorthodox methods. For example, setting up an erotic dance stage in the lobby. What was the point of that? Fan Yu smiled through his tears and happily came forward to wash his hands and make tea for him. Fan Meng began to play the zither for him. After the song ended, Arbor glanced at him. He seemed to play well, but she had always liked to listen to fast-paced music. This kind of slow music sounded like a lullaby, and the more she listened to it, the more she wanted to sleep. Alas, thinking about how he had to waste his good sleep time like this, Jojo felt a bit of heartache. "What did you play just now?" Darling Qiao's face was expressionless. Fan Meng covered her mouth with her sleeve and secretly chuckled. This little customer in front of him was really strange. Usually, the customers who pretended to be elegant in their restaurant would pretend to be very knowledgeable, even if they didn't understand the tune he played. But this little girl asked what tune it was with a calm expression, not at all thinking that she would be ridiculed if she asked. "This is young Master Song Feng's new tune from the ancient tune of yearning." Miss Qiao's expression was calm as if she had never heard of lovesickness before. She replied with an "oh," and didn't continue the conversation. Fan Yu handed her a cup of hot tea and asked with a smile, "Do you want some snacks?" "Why are you eating snacks in the middle of the night?" Arbor glanced at Fan Yu expressionlessly. As soon as the little fellow stopped talking, the atmosphere in the room fell silent. However, The two of them were used to visiting brothels and were used to seeing all kinds of guests. They were used to adjusting the atmosphere, so they weren't afraid of the little fellow's stoic face. As Fan Yu brewed the tea, she chatted with Arbor in a good mood. "Miss, isn't yearning too nice?" "It's so," Arbor said faintly. "It's not as refreshing as Golden Spear Tune." His decadent voice made her feel a little drowsy. "Refreshing? Little girl, are you sure you're not here to make fun of me?" Yearning tune expresses the strong feelings between a man and a woman, and the whole tune is lingering with faint sadness. It's about a female general falling in love with a young master from a scholarly family, but it's hard for her to express her love. The female general went around in circles, but before she could express her feelings, she was sent to the battlefield by the great king. She returned from the battlefield, and that young master committed suicide for love. Chapter 2157. Arbor glanced at Fan Yu. "It's hard to confess your love?" "Yes, it's obvious that you like him very much, but you're stubbornly refusing to confess." Arbor looked at him thoughtfully. "What if you feel very happy when you see someone?" Fan Yu was startled, then smiled. The little girl has someone she likes." Arbor nodded vigorously. "I didn't jump out from a crack in a rock. Of course I have someone I like." Fan Yu chuckled and nodded. "Then have you confessed to him?" "Confessed?" Arbor thought for a moment and shook his head. Every time, Prince Emo would say to him, "Jojo, I like you." Then he would naturally say, "Me too." This shouldn't be considered a confession. Arbor blinked. "Is there still a need to confess?" Fan Yu and Fan Meng leaned closer to her and nodded. "Of course there's a need to confess. Since you like him, you have to confess. If you don't confess, how can you let the other party know that you like him?" "Yes, yes, yes, not only do you have to confess, many girls will personally sew something they like and give it to the other party." The tone of the conversation changed, inexplicably becoming cheerful. Arbor, however, didn't realize it. He thought about their words and nodded. "What you said makes some sense. But what do girls usually give?" "I embroidered a lotus for him in the past, and he liked it very much." Arbor turned to look at Fan Meng. "What do you give your lover?" Fan Meng covered her mouth and chuckled. "Naturally, I'll give him whatever he likes." Arbor looked up at the ceiling and thought hard. "He's never said that he likes anything in particular. He likes everything I give him. Why don't I plant a lotus for him?" Fan Meng. Fan Yu couldn't help but want to laugh. This was the most interesting girl he had met in a long time. Since he likes everything, then there's no need to give him anything. Arbor nodded. "I think so too." At this point, the awkward atmosphere between the three of them had become much more harmonious. Fan Yu and Fan Meng helped her think of a solution, such as how to confess to Prince Mo and how to present it to him. Unknowingly, half an hour had passed. As for the Crown Prince, who had angrily gone to the House of Spring to capture his wife, not long after he and Shichen ran onto the street, they encountered a small group of assassins. The other party had come in a hurry, and there were only 20 or so people in total. All of them were 10th level Spirit Realm experts. Even in Shuntian Prefecture, this was not a small force. However, to Emo Lien and Hichen, it was clearly too weak. The assassins came quickly, but so did Tong and the others. Within a few minutes, there was no need for Emo Lien to personally take action. Tong led a group of secret guards and took care of these small flies in a matter of minutes. Emo Lien stood there gloomily. Hichen couldn't help but laugh. "It's the middle of the night, and you're being assassinated the moment you go out on the street. I'm afraid that the other party isn't joking, right? If this was not a joke, then what was it? Just a few kittens, what could they do? Master, please punish us." Tong led a group of people and knelt on one knee in front of Emo Lien with some fear and trepidation. Prince Emo waved his hand and said, "You may leave. It looks like they've planted spies around you." A small action in the middle of the night attracted assassins. Hichen smiled faintly. However, this person obviously doesn't have enough brains. Chapter 2158. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent these small fries to assassinate him. No matter what, they had to transfer over 1,000 people. Otherwise, how could they surround and kill the crown prince? Mo Lien glared at that guy. This damned guy looked like he wanted to see the world in chaos. Hateful. It's not bad that he could come out in the middle of the night and transfer so many people in a hurry, Mo Lien said indifferently. Oh, it seems that you already know who made a move against you. Now, he's still in Shuntian Prefecture, coincidentally has a grudge with me, and his brain isn't very bright. Who else could it be? That heir of Jianpei Wang family? Hechen blinked. Mo, what's his name again? Mo Kuan, Mo Lien said indifferently. Hechen nodded and looked at him with a playful expression. In your Mo family, other than you, is there anyone else with a slightly higher IQ? Mo Lien snorted and turned to look at him. Of course there is. Hechen made an N sound. Mo Lien didn't say anything else. With a frown, his figure flashed, and he headed toward the House of Spring not far away. Just as the two walked into the House of Spring's lobby, they attracted the gasps of the crowd. Heavens, House of Spring is indeed Shuntian Prefecture's #1 brothel. Look, 2 more peerless beauties have come. Wow, they're better looking than the 10 great handsome men in the brothel. Yes, among the 10 great handsome men, only young Master Song Feng can compare to them. Not good enough. Mo Lien's gaze swept across the lobby and saw a group of fools drooling at him and Hechen. The 2 men's faces darkened, and a trace of annoyance flitted through their hearts at the same time. In this hall, not only were there fat men, there were also many women. Beside them sat delicate and weak officials to keep them company. They were drinking wine, playing music, and singing. If the 2 didn't suddenly appear at the door, the music wouldn't have stopped. Mo Lien's handsome face completely revealed a dark expression that this little guy really had guts. She dared to barge into such a lousy place. Where did this little beauty come from? Come and give me a hug. A fat official wearing a scholar's hat walked towards Mo Lien with a jug of wine in his hand. However, before he could approach, Crown Prince Mo swatted him away with a black face with a flick of his sleeve. He heavily hit the corner of the table, then bounced off the table and fell to the ground. He groaned and groaned in pain while holding his waist. Why did you hit me? Mo Lien's eyes sharpened, and a trace of fire suddenly ignited between her fingers. Wow. Spirit Master. The fat squire was so frightened that he cried out in alarm. He scrambled backwards and cupped his hands to beg for mercy. Young master, please spare my life. This lowly one has eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please forgive me. Mo Lien coldly glanced at him, and the crimson flame in her hand slowly calmed down. Hechen clicked his tongue and asked cheerfully, Have you seen a little girl with a stoic face? Everyone saw that the 2 of them didn't come with good intentions, so they didn't dare to provoke them. They hurriedly nodded and talked at the same time. Yes. She went upstairs with Fan Meng and Fan Yu. Yes. Fan Meng and Fan Yu are greeting the little girl. What the hell were Fan Meng and Fan Yu? The 2 men looked at each other. A trace of danger flashed across Mo Lien's deep phoenix eyes. Hechen wanted to laugh and spread his hands helplessly. This little guy is courting death. Chapter 2159. Spring filled the room. A rich wine aroma slowly wafted through the room. Fan Meng's slender fingers appeared as tender as spring onions under the lantern light. Arbor didn't pay attention to the wine he poured and held his teacup pensively. From their meaning, they were going to take the initiative to confess to Lien? Would he be happy if Miss Chiao blinked her eyes? How could he understand her feelings if he didn't confess? Was it like this? But in the past, when she didn't say anything to him, he was able to understand her in a second. In that case, it looked like there wasn't much difference whether she said it or not. Gurgle gurgle. Fan Yu filled Miss Chiao's teacup with hot water. She propped up her chin with one hand and squinted at the little girl in front of her. It was very strange. In this kind of bustling city, it was as if the little girl was sitting by the lakeside and enjoying the scenery. Her body was untainted by dust, and her stoic face was expressionless. She really was a good-looking little girl. She wondered what kind of person the man she liked would be. He should be very blissful. Bang! The sudden sound of the door being kicked open, accompanied by the startled cries of a flock of orioles and swallows, instantly broke the tranquility and elegance of the room. Many handsome young men who didn't mind the commotion rushed over and shouted all at once. "Aya, you scared this baby to death. General Jia is showing off his might. Wow. It's Shuntian Prefecture's Tiger Pendant Camp's General Jia. He looks so mighty. It's that pretty little stoic. Tiske, I don't know why, but when I see this stoic face, I suddenly have a feeling that my heart is moved. Go shit yourself. Which outstanding person isn't moved when you see one? So hateful. I'll slap you to death if you talk like that." Miss Chiao put down her teacup with a bang and abruptly stood up with a slap on the table. A green vine swiftly darted out of her sleeve and abruptly whipped the person's chest. What? Cries came from the surroundings. They saw that Tiger Pendant Camp's General Jia was sent flying by the little stoic's whip. He crashed into the opposite room with a bang and directly smashed the door. What? The little stoic is mighty. This little girl with a stoic face is really good at martial arts. A crowd of clowns stood on both sides of the doorway, cheering, clapping and waving flags at Arbor. The little girl felt a headache coming on. She really didn't know what was wrong with Yi Lingmin to bring her to such a messy place. "Young Master Song Feng is here. Quickly move aside. Young Master Song Feng is here." The noise of the crowd could be heard outside the door. As the two groups of people retreated, Arbor raised her head and saw the man who had been flirtatious and smiling at the entrance walking towards her. Along the way, they were accompanied by laughter that sounded like background music. While everyone was grinning from ear to ear, the little stoic's expressionless face somehow felt especially comical. "Aya, what happened?" Next to young Master Song Feng, the handsome man in red with half of his thigh exposed and his snow-white skin was using his sleeve to cover his chin and mouth. He was staring at them with great interest. At this time, someone had already helped General Jia up. This General Jia, who looked very formidable with his unshaven beard, was a bit funny now. It wasn't a glorious thing to be thrown out of the door for picking a fight. Under everyone's watchful eyes, such a big guy was sent flying with a single slap. How shameful. Chapter 2160. General Jia's face was bruised and swollen, and his expression was also very displeased. He glared at Xiao Mu with bulging tiger-like eyes as he panted heavily, unable to say anything for quite a while. General Jia is angry. Will the little stoic suffer a loss? Suffer a loss? You must be joking. Have you ever seen the little stoic suffer a loss since just now? Everyone. Indeed, they hadn't. They had only seen this stoic face toss people out very intimately. They really hadn't seen her suffer a loss before. Young Master Song Feng glanced speechlessly at General Jia and coughed lightly. "General Jia, what are you doing?" General Jia glowered and pointed at Arbor as he shouted, She, this little girl, what right does she have to sit on my fan meng and fan you? This general is so angry." He, the Grand General of Shuntian Prefecture's Tiger Battalion, actually didn't call for his top hostess to serve him when he came here to drink with prostitutes. What right did a little girl who hadn't even grown out her hair yet have to invite two great beauties? Arbor. Everyone's eyelids twitched when they saw her withdraw a beam of lush green wood spirit energy from her hand. Stop. The man in fiery red clothes hastily reached out to stop her from exerting force. "Don't smash it. This building can't withstand 2 smashes from you." Fan Meng, who finally had a pleasant chat with Miss Chiao, hastily stepped forward and said, "General Jia, this is our young master's arrangement. Would you like to come another day?" "Why should I come another day? So long-winded." Arbor impatiently glanced at the middle-aged general, and the spirit energy in her hand surged. She was already very angry. Just as she was about to toss this so-called general down the building, she caught sight of Yi Lingmin standing outside the crowd in men's clothing out of the corner of her eye. "Yi Lingmin, stop right there." Arbor shouted angrily and turned around, abandoning everyone. He flew out of the crowd with a whoosh and swiftly chased after Yi Lingmin. "Little girl, Fan Meng exclaimed. However, the little girl was like a wisp of smoke, instantly moving away from their eyes. Young Master Song Feng frowned slightly. Just as he was about to follow them, he saw two bodyguards with bruised noses and swollen faces running up the stairs and crying pitifully, young master, it's bad, it's bad." There were two fiends outside. He fought his way up. The red-clothed man rolled his eyes speechlessly. "What's wrong with you today? Why are all kinds of people here?" As he spoke, everyone felt their eyes light up. Two slender figures quickly floated in front of them. The Crown Prince's face turned even darker when he saw all kinds of beautiful men on the second floor. Yuan Shurchen couldn't help but burst into laughter. She turned her head and looked around. "Call your person in charge out." "Yo, young masters, do you want to join the spring house?" A middle-aged woman in the crowd couldn't help but tease. Mo Lien's severe gaze swept over, instantly stifling that woman's shrill laughter into her throat. The scene was instantly dead silent. Young Master Song Feng leisurely walked out of the crowd and glanced at the two people with a smile. "That's me. Do you have any advice for me, young masters?" Yuan Shurchen sized up this charming young master in white from head to toe, then silently glanced at the black-faced prince and, hand over the little stoic. So he came to find the little stoic girl. Realization dawned on everyone. Chapter 2161. Young Master Song Feng was slightly taken aback. Then he laughed and said, "You two must be joking. That little girl is so skilled that she can come and go as she pleases in our building. How could I, a lowly person, possibly stop her?" Hu Shurchen looked at them with a grin. Where did she go? In the next second, that smiling expression disappeared and was replaced by an indifferent one. "If you don't speak honestly, I'll tear down your building in a bits." "What? Don't, sir." Mo Lien. He had a headache as he looked at these coy male escorts and reached out to press his aching head. His wifey running to this kind of place in the middle of the night was truly rebelling. "Young master, our spring full house is a legitimate business," the man in red shouted indignantly. "How can you be so unreasonable?" Young Master Song Feng blocked the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple people who were filled with righteous indignation. He glanced indifferently at Mo Lien and Hu Shurchen and cupped his hands. "Masters, please don't play with this small shop anymore. That little girl just now followed someone to the rear courtyard. How about we go over and take a look now?" "Lead the way," Mo Lien growled impatiently. General Jia, whose face was flushed from drinking, suddenly interrupted angrily and asked, "Who is that little stoic to you? And who are you?" A severe glint flitted through Mo Lien's eyes. When everyone saw that General Jia wanted to recklessly reason with someone, they promptly reached out to stop him. General, calm down, General. Who are you?" Hu Shurchen leisurely swept that general a glance and raised the corners of her eyes. Unexpectedly, it was as if General Jia was possessed. When he saw Hu Shurchen's handsome face with a faint smile, he actually became absent-minded and wanted to pounce on her with a drooling face. "Beauty, this general is Shuntian Prefecture's Tiger Pendant Battalion's general." Slap. A heavy slap landed on General Jia's originally somewhat swollen old face. Everyone truly felt sorry for the general. Hu Shurchen's slap from a distance wasn't light at all. Two teeth were swept out, and General Jia was so shocked that he screamed. That General Jia still wanted to say something, but unexpectedly another slap came on his right cheek. The slap landed heavily, knocking out two of his right big teeth. Now, both sides of his face were symmetrical and swollen, squeezing his eyes into slits. Being beaten to the point of looking for teeth all over the floor, this was probably the kind of situation that the female orioles and swallows felt their hearts skip a beat and silently shut their mouths. How terrifying! "Hurry up and lead the way." Mo Lien glanced coldly at young Master Song Feng, feeling very unhappy. Without another word, young Master Song Feng turned around and walked towards the backyard. Everyone followed and went downstairs. When they arrived at the back garden, they saw a figure standing behind the rockery from afar. When the crowd walked over, they saw the young lady with her back facing them. She shouted angrily, Yilingnan, why aren't you coming out? Why did you lead me here? Lien was about to quickly walk over when she suddenly saw the young lady pinch out a talisman seal. She suddenly raised her arms, and dozens of tracking talismans and revealing talismans scattered from her hands. Bang! When everyone heard the sound, they abruptly turned their heads and saw a figure appear beside the flower path. She was wearing cyan men's clothing, but the hat on her head was knocked to the ground, revealing a head of fine black hair. Sure enough, it was a woman. Did the little stoic miss barge into the House of Spring for this woman? Young Master Song Feng was startled and raised his head to look ahead. Chapter 2162. The clear and cold moonlight shone on the green ripples at the edge of the pool. The little stoic turned around. On her snow-white face, her eyes were like two cold stars as she stared straight at the woman who was sitting paralyzed on the ground. Her eyes didn't conceal the icy glint that resembled an icy bolt of lightning. I let you off last time, yet you still dare to appear in front of me. The little stoic coldly said, Yilingnan, today, I'll get rid of you, this calamity, on behalf of my sect. Arbor suddenly paused, and his gaze followed the faintly flowing moonlight and landed on Lien. Husband. The little fellow finally saw her dark-faced husband and floated to the man's side in a flash. She looked up at him and asked, Why did you come? Ma Shurchin helplessly face-bombed and chuckled. Instead of sleeping in the middle of the night, you came to this red light district. It'd be strange if Lien could sit still. When he mentioned this, the little stoic was immediately displeased. Husband, where did you run off to in the middle of the night? Lien couldn't help but laugh in exasperation. This little fellow even learned to complain first when the guilty party was the victim. Tong came to find me to discuss something. Lien reached out to pinch her small face with a grin. This isn't the main point. The main point is that when I returned to my room to take a look, my wifey actually disappeared. Arbor felt a bit guilty and hastily turned his head to look at Yilingnan, who was still unable to move after being struck down by talisman energy. It's her. She threw a small stone at the window. She brought me here. Husband, this restaurant is really strange, the little stoic said softly, her fingers sliding over the back of the man's hand. You have to be careful. Restaurant? Everyone. Yilingnan clenched her teeth and suddenly moved. However, she didn't run away. Instead, she pounced at General Jia like a gust of wind. Jiawu, accept your death. General Jia narrowed his old eyes as he stared at the pouncing Yilingnan and couldn't help but fly into a rage. For you. Without another word, Yilingnan stabbed her sword thrice. However, after being hit by the tracking talisman, she was forced to reveal herself. At this moment, she was still somewhat exhausted and weak, so the spiritual energy she sent out seemed to be somewhat weak. General Jia's skills were about the same as hers. Although he didn't have much ability to retaliate in front of the little stoic and Lien, he could still deal with Yilingnan, an elementary rank spiritual cultivator. She kicked Yilingnan in the stomach, causing her to take a few steps back. Yilingnan turned to look at Arbor. Junior sister, take him down first. I'll let you punish him as you wish. Who is he? Arbor asked with a frown. On the surface, he is the general of Shuntian Prefecture's Prungtiger camp, but according to my investigation, this person is the deputy commander of Gung Pengcheng's private army, the Shuntian Guard. So that was the case. Yilingnan had probably lured her here to capture this Vice Commander Jia. Arbor released Lien's hand and jumped in front of General Jia. General Jia was completely jolted awake by Yilingmin's fright. When he heard Yilingnan expose his identity, he was infuriated, but he was completely unable to stop her from continuing. After glancing at the little stoic, he abruptly turned around and wanted to escape. What kind of joke was this? This stoic face still had two formidable helpers. If he didn't leave now, when would he? Unfortunately, he had just turned around when his left leg was grabbed by a vine. He looked down and saw a green vine coiled around his left leg. Someone exerted force, and he was abruptly pulled to the ground. With a bang, he smashed into the ground like a dog eating shit. Chapter 2163. At this time, General Jia was probably cursing in his heart. A belly full of anger rushed out from the depths of his heart, and Jia Zhong angrily berated, "You people, let go of this general. You dare to attack the general of Tiger Pring Camp? Aren't you afraid of incurring the anger of the entire Shuntian prefecture?" Arbor sneered and thought, "Even your Shuntian prefecture's prefecture master, Geng Pengcheng, has already vanished into thin air. What does a small general of Tiger Pring Camp count for? Let go of me." Arbor took out an ice sword glittering with cold light and pointed it at Tiger Pring Camp's general, Jia Zhong, who was lying on the ground. "If you talk nonsense again, I'll cut off your head and feed it to the dogs." Cut it off. Little junior sister, he's provoking you." Arbor naturally knew that Jia Zhong was provoking her to kill him, so she expressionlessly glanced at the man on the ground. Arbor's fingers moved slightly, and a pearl-sized white jade ball was flicked into Jia Zhong's mouth with a whoosh. "Don't worry, you won't die for the time being." Withdrawing her ice sword, Arbor turned and returned to Emo Lien's side. "Go back." "Wait." Young Master Song Feng hurriedly stood out from the crowd and said with a frown, "Little girl, General Jia is also a guest of our spring house. You can't take him away like this." Arbor glanced at him and suddenly turned her head, facing him with the back of her head. Hu Shurchen couldn't help but want to laugh. Every time the little guy was stubborn, he liked to face others with the back of his head. Emo Lien reached out to hold Arbor's little hand and looked down at her with a smile. Miss Chiao inexplicably felt that Prince Mo's gaze was a bit scary. So strange, why did she feel a chill on the back of her neck? Was it her illusion? The Crown Prince clearly smiled so gently and looked like a gentle spring breeze, but she felt a bit gloomy. An illusion. She must be overthinking it. Out of the instinct of a small animal, the little girl, who sensed a bit of danger, suddenly raised her head and smiled sweetly at Prince Emo. "Husband, I want a hug." Hu Shurchen was speechless. The little girl was too cunning. Who could resist her? When this stoic little face suddenly changed into a smile, it was truly so sweet that it made one's heart follow along and form the 3 rivers of spring water, sparkling under the sunlight. One wished for nothing more than to hold the sun, moon, and universe in their hands, just to make her smile. Sure enough, Emo Lien was a bit dumbstruck as he watched. He subconsciously nodded his head and naturally picked up the little fellow. Ah. Jia Wu suddenly let out an extremely tragic cry. Everyone turned their heads to look, only to see that Jia Wu's entire arms seemed to have rotted. The flesh peeling off inch by inch caused everyone to involuntarily feel a chill in their hearts. Yi Lingmin was also shocked and couldn't help but move to the side to avoid being stained by Jia Wu's disgusting flesh. Arbor flicked his finger, and a bit of rune light flew into Jia Wu's glabella. Suddenly, Jia Wu's figure moved and he gave up struggling. He stood up woodenly and expressionlessly followed Prince Emo as he walked over mechanically. "General Jia?" Young Master Song Feng was startled. He carefully looked at Jia Wu's face and saw that his entire face was old-fashioned and serious, without the slightest expression. It was as if he was instantly controlled by someone. Could it be a puppet rune? A bad premonition slid through young Master Song Feng's heart. Chapter 2164. If it was a puppet curse, depending on the level of the talisman, it could cause the victim to lose their self-awareness for 70 to 60 days, and the victim would have to obey orders obediently. Of course, it wasn't impossible if there was another talisman practitioner with more profound talisman power to help the victim undo the curse. It was just that. The puppet curse that the stoic-faced little girl threw out seemed to be very impressive. Why did the little girl have a curse on her? Young Master Song Feng couldn't help but be a bit puzzled. "Song Feng, are we going to let them go just like that?" The gorgeous man in red looked at young Master Song Feng in astonishment. Young Master Song Feng glanced at him. "What else? Are you going to rush up and stall them? Then I'll send people to the prefecture head to ask for reinforcements." The gorgeous man in red chuckled. "Then forget it. What a joke. If he really dared to rush up, wouldn't he be torn into pieces by that fierce little stoic?" Yi Lingmin followed them silently all the way to the inn's entrance. Only then did Arbor turn to look at her and ask coldly, "Still not leaving? I have a few words to say to you." Mo Lien and He Shurchen turned to glance at Arbor and nodded. "Let's go up first." They entered the side room. After being tormented for most of the night, the sky was already a bit bright. Arbor looked at her indifferently. "What is it?" "At that time, I was in a hurry to go to Shuntian Prefecture, so I found a secret medicine and took it. Although my cultivation improved by leaps and bounds in a short time, my cultivation will gradually dissipate. However, with the passage of time, my cultivation will slowly disperse, and it will disperse faster and faster with each passing year," Yi Lingmin said softly. "That's what you deserve. Don't expect me to save you." Arbor said bluntly. "Yes, I never expected little junior sister to save me." Yi Lingmin nodded and said, "I deserve it, but I'm telling little junior sister this because I want to tell you that I might not have much time left. So I want to tell you in advance about the things I've investigated over the years." Arbor was silent for a long time. He looked at her coldly and said, "Speak." "I have followed this Jia Wu for a long time. After many investigations, I found out that he is the deputy commander of Gung Pengcheng's private army." Yi Lingmin glanced at General Jia, who was standing silently at the side. Gung Pengcheng usually keeps a very low profile. It's very difficult to investigate him. If this Jia Wu didn't like men, I'm afraid we wouldn't have caught him so easily. Yi Lingmin continued, "According to my investigation, I suspect that Gung Pengcheng's private army is probably hiding under the red light district. I followed Jia Wu several times, but in the blink of an eye, I lost him. If I were to say that the entrance is not underground, I cannot imagine how that Jia Wu would be able to disappear before my eyes." Arbor's expression eased a little. He stretched out his hand and waved at the frozen Jia Wu. "Come here." Upon hearing this, Jia Zhong walked up like a marionette before stopping in front of Qiao Mu and the others, standing there in a daze. "Gung Pengcheng secretly cultivated a private army?" "Yes, Shuntian guards." "How is their strength?" 100,000 mystic cultivators. 5,000 spiritual cultivators below level 10. 500 spiritual cultivators above level 10. Yi Lingmin's expression changed. This number was already very large to her. It seemed that removing this faction would not be something that could be done overnight. Arbor asked expressionlessly, "Where is the base?" Chapter 2165. Where's the base? Arbor asked again expressionlessly. A hint of pain and struggle appeared on Jia Wu's face. Perhaps he was like this out of his instinctive resistance when the core question was asked. Arbor threw another dictum talisman at him. Under the urging of the puppet talisman and dictum talisman, Jia Wu finally calmed down and said, It's 5 li outside the apricot blossom pavilion, under the bridge." After saying that, Jia Wu was like a puppet and did not make another sound. There was a spot on his arm that was so rotten that the bone could almost be seen, so subconsciously, he was in great pain and kept furrowing his brows. "Since that's the case, little junior sister, let's not delay this matter. We've already alerted the enemy today." Mo Lien said calmly, "Do you think those people will still be waiting for you to go back and capture them?" Arbor nodded in agreement with Mo Lien's words. Most likely, the moment they came out of Spring House, the underground base on the other end had already started moving people. Moreover, the underground base outside the apricot blossom pavilion probably only had a small portion of people arranged there. To gather as many as 100,000 mystic cultivators, a small street probably couldn't hide so many people. Arbor glanced at Yi Lingmin, and the latter sensibly stood up and said indifferently, "I don't believe they can run far. I'll go over there and take a look." So, Arbor swept her a cold glance. "You're still as impulsive as before. You can't even handle a level 4 spiritual cultivator like Jia Wu today, let alone other people. If you rashly go over like this, you'll just be throwing away your life for nothing." Yi Lingmin clenched her fists and turned to look at her. It's my duty to investigate the whereabouts of Shuntian Prefecture's main culprit. I definitely won't let them off." Arbor was indifferent. "What else do you want to investigate? Lu Yizhi is dead, and Gung Pengcheng also vanished into thin air. The remaining people are merely unimportant people. I won't let any of the people who deserve to die off. Gung Pengcheng is dead. The Gung Pengcheng you assassinated at the banquet that night was one of my men, Arbor said coldly. Yi Lingmin's entire body trembled as if all her strength had been sucked out of her. She sat down on the stool with a thump and stared blankly ahead. I've been investigating for so many years, I've put in so much effort, but in the end, why don't you just move your finger and be done with it? Master is right. I'm impulsive and reckless, but I'm not smart enough. I can't compare to you. Yi Lingmin lowered her head and sighed dejectedly. Arbor looked at her and said coldly, "Scram before I change my mind. Don't ever appear in front of me again. I want to pay my respects to Master and Martial Uncle's memorial tablets." "You're not worthy," Arbor said coldly, rejecting her request. "Little junior sister, do you hate me?" "Yes." Arbor clenched her fists tightly, an indescribable sorrow in her heart. "Because of your competitiveness, the entire holy water sect was brutally massacred. Where were you when I was cleaning up the corpses of my fellow disciples? Where were you when I was digging graves for my senior sisters and Martial Uncle? Where were you when I was piling dirt for them? Where were you when I was kneeling in front of them and sobbing my heart out? Yi Lingmin, don't think that I'll forgive you just because you shed a few tears in front of me." Chapter 2166. Never in this lifetime. Arbor's cold gaze landed on Yi Lingmin's face. She turned around and said angrily, "Liv, don't ever appear in front of me again." "I'm sorry, little junior sister. I regret it too. I regret it so much." Yi Lingmin's tears fell one by one. Seeing that Arbor's back was facing her and no longer speaking, Yi Lingmin hung her head and dragged her feet out of the door, looking back every step she took. "Jojo." Mo Lien reached out and gently pried apart her tightly clenched fingers. He turned to look at Hu Shurchen, who had a serious expression on his face. "Why you still standing there? Get a wet cloth." Hu Shurchen rolled her eyes at him and got up reluctantly. She took out a clean handkerchief from her pocket, washed it, and brought it over. Mo Lien opened the little fellow's palm and wiped off a few drops of blood for her. He sighed and said, "Jojo, I wanted to teach you a lesson, but you're so cunning. How can I bear to teach you a lesson now that you're like this?" Arbor sniffled and glanced at him. She said expressionlessly, "What did I do wrong?" Hu Shurchen chuckled and said, "You didn't do anything wrong. You went to the red light district alone in the middle of the night to look for a man. Isn't that great?" "What man am I looking for?" Arbor's expression said, "You're making it up, keep making it up." Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and all those dreams and worries? Aren't they all yours? Are you talking about the green peacock and the red chicken? Arbor frowned. That restaurant just has more people of all shapes and sizes. The tea is average and the food isn't that good either. Restaurant. Hu Shurchen and Mo Lien looked at each other. Mo Lien held back her laughter and asked, "What green peacock and red chicken? What did you see?" "It's so colorful. Green peacock, red chicken, yellow lantern grass, blue phoenix flowers. A bunch of messy colors. It hurts my eyes." The two men. "Don't you think these people are good looking?" Yuan Shurchen's mouth twitched as she asked. Arbor shook his head. "What's there to see? It was a jumble of colors. It's not even 1% as good as Duan Yu." Crown Prince Mo's smiling face abruptly stiffened. Originally, he was still very pleased with himself. Sure enough, his baby automatically filtered out a group of orioles and swallows. But why the heck did Jojo always like to use Duan Yu as the benchmark? For example, what does Jojo think of Yas? Jojo, I don't know him. He's not even 1/10 as good-looking as Duan Yu. Duan Yu, this guy, was truly a lingering spirit. So hateful. Heechin blinked and suddenly laughed. "What about me? What about me? Am I better looking or is that Duan Yu better looking?" Xiao Mu glanced at him before looking at her dear husband, who was sitting on the side and looking at her with a grin. A very strong desire to live inexplicably arose in her heart, and she hastily hugged Mo Lien's arm and exclaimed, My Lien is the most beautiful. Yuan Shurchen guffawed and patted the little fellow's head. Suddenly, his hand paused, and his gaze landed on her palm. Jojo, your wound? HM? Miss Chiao looked down. Mo Lien's gaze also landed on her palm, which was seeping with a few drops of blood. There were now a few tiny bruises on her originally fair and tender hand. They were small wounds caused by pinching her fingertips. But they had completely disappeared by now. Her hands had returned to their original incomparably fair appearance, and not a single wound could be seen. Chapter 2167. Let me take a look. Mo Lien pulled her into his arms and flipped open her little paws to examine them carefully again. He nodded and said, "Your recovery ability is very strong. I can't tell that you were once injured at all." It was really quite strange. The recovery speed of this kind of injury was a little strange. Arbor looked up at the two of them and said with a blank expression, "It was like this in the past." "Aya, my Chiao, your little body may contain an extremely strong strange energy. It's probably the effect of the Xuanji core?" To be honest, even Arbor didn't quite believe this. Before she had obtained the Xuanji core, this strange recovery ability had occurred from time to time. It was just that she had neglected it most of the time. Or perhaps, she subconsciously didn't want to think about it? The Xuanji core is just a cultivation inheritance. It shouldn't have anything to do with this self-recovery ability. Mo Lien said with a smile, "But it's okay. This self-recovery ability is a good thing. Just don't show it in front of others in the future. It's okay if you don't know what's going on. You should know in the future if you have the chance." Chen Chen patted the little fellow's head and got up to wave his hand as he walked out of the door. "You've been tired for half the night. You're almost dog-tired. Don't wake me up when you're going to catch up on sleep. If you don't sleep well, your face will be damaged." Chen Chen leisurely walked out and said faintly. Mo Lien snorted and flung the door to the side room shut. He lowered his head to look at Miss Chiao in his arms. Arbor glanced at him and instantly pulled his hand away. She jogged to the side of the bed and rolled onto it. She pulled the blanket over her face and covered it from head to toe. "Husband, Jojo is sleepy. I'll sleep first." Mo Lien, looking at her two little boots that were exposed outside the blanket, Mo Lien couldn't help but want to laugh. This little fellow didn't have any emotional intelligence. She was used to reading people's expressions. In order to prevent him from settling the score later, she slipped away first and pretended to be asleep. She didn't even take off her shoes. Mo Lien walked forward and sat by the bed. He helplessly reached out to take off her shoes. "Wife." Arbor saw that he had failed to pretend to be asleep, so he peeked out from under the covers and blinked at him. Mo Lien bent down and looked at her with a smile. "Do you still want to go to those brothels in the future?" "What brothel?" Xiao Mu's eyes darted around. Mo Lien couldn't help but want to laugh. "Don't pretend. Pretend to be calm. I'm guessing that once you walk in, your little face will be stunned. I don't understand what you're talking about." Arbor pulled the blanket up to cover his face expressionlessly. Mo Lien couldn't help but want to laugh. She raised her hand to pull down her quilt and poked her cheek. "You clearly know that it's not a restaurant, it's just a small brothel. Still pretending?" Arbor peeked out a pair of large eyes and looked at him carefully. She rolled over and rolled onto the bed. "Hubby, I'm going to sleep. I don't understand what you're talking about at all." Mo Lien couldn't help but stare at the back of her head. He leaned over and blew into her ear as he whispered, "Wife, next time you sneak off by yourself behind hubby's back again, you'll really be out of luck." Arbor only felt a chill at the back of her neck. How scary. To think that she had pretended to be cute and tried her best to squeeze out a cute smile for him to see. So he had seen through it all along. This man was too smart and sharp. She had almost fooled herself. Chapter 2168. Perchow. Arbor was disappointed. Actually, she already knew what that red light district was the moment she walked into it. She pulled a long face just to tell everyone, "This darling doesn't know what the hell this place is. This is merely a restaurant. A strange snack bar. Nothing more. Who knew that her dear husband would see through her at a glance? Well, poor Qiao. Her husband would see through any of her little tricks. Qiao at the time, Qiao, this spring full house seems to be a men's brothel. Why would Yi Lingmin come to this kind of place? I'll go in and take a look. Qiao, master, I'll be killed by the great prince. Wah. Qiao at the time, how could that be? If you don't say it, I won't say it. Only you and I will know. Who would know? She had never visited a brothel in her previous life. Since she came here unexpectedly in this life, she might as well stroll around. Miss Qiao expressionlessly walked up the steps. Aya, little miss, does your parents know that you came to our spring full house to stroll around? So long-winded. If His Excellency found out, how could she come to this men's brothel? Couldn't he tell that she was just here to stroll around? Arbor reined in her thoughts and flipped over, doing her best to squeeze out a sweet smile. Hubby, don't make a fuss. Jojo is so sleepy. Mo Lien's smile reached the depths of his eyes. He tilted his head and looked at her with a smile. Then sleep. Remember not to think of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple in your dreams, much less do on you. Think of hubby. Arbor turned her head and faced him with the back of her head. She immediately closed her eyes and sank into her conscious to chat with Qiao. Qiao, you're capable now. You'll divulge little master's whereabouts to hubby. Wah, master, Qiao is innocent. You don't know how terrifying the great crown prince and the venerable peach blossom immortal were back then. They both threatened Qiao. One wanted to roast Qiao, and the other wanted to throw Qiao into the frying pan. The most wicked thing was that they even wanted to throw Qiao into the cesspool. Qiao can't go into the cesspool. Arbor, wicked indeed. Master, Qiao is in trouble. The crown prince had brought out his flames. How terrifying. Qiao hates lightning and fire the most. Qiao is too pitiful. Enough. Sell your ass in misery. Xiao Mu directly blocked this little fellow. This stinking brat had purposely exposed her whereabouts. No matter how vicious those two men were, they wouldn't hurt Qiao. Don't think that she didn't know. Initially, he thought that he wouldn't be able to fall asleep if he pretended to be asleep. Who knew in less than 2 minutes, she lost all consciousness and fell into a deep slumber. By the time he woke up, the sky was already dark. Arbor looked out of the window blankly and rolled out of bed. What's going on? She actually slept all the way to night. The little fellow jumped off the bed. Just as he finished putting on his clothes, he heard the door of the room move. Mo Lien pushed the door open and walked in. Upon seeing her standing inside the room, Crown Prince Mo couldn't resist curling his lips in amusement. Qiao woke up. Arbor felt that the Crown Prince's gaze was clearly filled with mockery. Arbor raised her hand to tidy up her messy long hair. Her eyes drifted as she looked around. It's already so late. I didn't think that I would sleep the entire afternoon. Haha. Dao Wuji's laughter came from outside the door. My sister-in-law. You didn't sleep the entire afternoon. You slept from yesterday afternoon until tonight. She could really sleep. Chapter 2169. What? Arbor was stunned. She walked to the door and poked her head out to look at everyone outside. Everyone was looking at her with smiles on their faces. It's fine. You advanced for 7 days and didn't have a good rest. It's only right for you to have a good sleep. Mo Lien slowly walked out and reached out to hold her little hand with a smile. Arbor coughed lightly and nodded. She didn't forget to roll her eyes at Dao Wuji when she walked out the door. You're the only one with a glib mouth. The group went downstairs to eat. It was a very sumptuous meal. After eating and drinking to their fill, Dao Wuji suggested that they go out for a stroll to help with digestion. Since they had nothing better to do, everyone agreed. Arbor slept for a day and night and was now full of energy. She could even walk with the wind. Mo Lien saw that she was walking quickly and reached out to pull her to his side. He looked at her in amusement. Why are you running? I'm not running. Why aren't you running? Are you worried that your husband will settle the score with you? Arbor's eyes turned and she reached out to grab his arm. Husband, did Dunjan send any news yesterday? Stiffly changing the topic. Mo Lien poked her forehead and couldn't help but laugh. Dunjan didn't send any news. I also find it a little strange. Wife, are you willing to accompany your husband on a night trip to Shuntian Prefecture's main residence? Arbor's eyes lit up. There had been no news from Dunjan for 2 days. It was reasonable for the two of them to sneak into the main residence and see how he was doing. Take me there, take me there. Everlasting Blade was walking in front of the two of them, so he could hear their conversation clearly. Now that he heard that they could sneak into Shuntian Prefecture's main residence to play, how could he sit still? He quickly volunteered and praised himself. Arbor glanced at him and said with a serious expression, "We're not going there to play. Lien and I are going there to do serious business." Yes. I'm also going to do something serious. Everlasting Blade pointed at his face and said with a mischievous smile, "Look at my serious face." Xiao Mu averted her eyes in disdain. "You don't look very reliable, so I'd better not." Dao Wuji looked at Mo Lien with a bitter expression. Breaking into Shuntian Prefecture at night, Jojo and I alone will be enough. Mo Lien said indifferently. If there are too many people, it'll be easier to alert the enemy. All right. Dao Wuji lowered his head. Arbor glanced at him and snorted. My peaches have ripened again. Do you want some? Alas. Dao Wuji was about to sigh when the word peach popped up in his head. He suddenly sobered up and raised his head. Yes. Give me a truckload. Bah. Arbor spat at him. This person was really asking for an exorbitant price. Dao Wuji looked a little aggrieved. Ever since he ate 2 peaches last time, this stingy little sister-in-law had stopped giving him any more. There were so many peach trees on Paradise Planet. The heavy peaches were about to crush the branches. What do you know? Jojo wants to use them to make spiritual peach wine. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal rolled his eyes at Dao Wuji and waved his hand. Go to the side. Don't meddle. Spiritual peach wine. Dao Wuji chuckled. In that case, Venerable Immortal must have drunk it before? Hu Shurchen snorted. Of course. Then do you have any with you? Chapter 2170. Ji-Chen glanced at him warily. Unfortunately, his brainless answer was almost instantaneous. Instead, it made Endless Blade certain that the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal definitely had this spiritual peach wine. Brother Chen, you're wrong. Of course, good wine should be shared with good friends. Ji-Chen glared at him with a look that said, Who's your brother? His expression was full of condemnation. You're already so old, yet you still want to pretend to be young and call me brother. The Peony Fairy couldn't help but burst into laughter. Endless Blade's mouth twitched. He threw himself at Ji-Chen, wanting to hug Ji-Chen's arm. Brother Chen, let's enjoy our blessings together. Good things should be shared. It's better to share than to share alone. Get lost. Ji-Chen kicked him without hesitation and dodged to little Taisue's side. Endless Blade thumped his chest and stamped his feet. This spiritual peach wine must be especially delicious. Otherwise, why would you be like this? For a sip of wine, he had become friendless. This wine was becoming more and more attractive to Endless Blade. Little Taisui glanced at Endless Blade in disdain. Where's your shame? I don't want it anymore. Everyone. Why was this idiot Everlasting Blade a member of their team? Just how careless was his answer? They really felt embarrassed for Endless Blade. Xiao Mu glanced at a certain person, Dao, who was incessantly making a scene, and helplessly took out a jug of wine. However, Endless Blade had his back to her, and Ji-Chen was especially fast. In the blink of an eye, he was beside her. In the next instant, the jug in her little hand was taken away by this uncle. Ji-Chen, what are you doing? You shameless bastard, how dare you steal my wine? Is this wine really that good? The Peony Fairy's curiosity was piqued. Luo de sniffed hard and praised, it's really good wine. The wine hadn't been opened yet, but they could already smell the faint fragrance of peach blossoms, accompanied by the rich fragrance of wine. Just smelling it made them feel refreshed. It really is good wine. Thin Monk, a man of few words, couldn't help but look up at the wine jug in Ji Chen's hand. Thin Tuchuo's image was a bit strange. Half of this fellow's hair was bald, and the other half was loose like a clump of withered grass. His entire face was sallow and he didn't like to talk much. Most of the time, he sat there silently, listening to the conversations of others. A wine that could make him open his mouth was obviously a top-notch wine. Limitless Blade wanted to take back his wine even more. He grabbed Yuan Shurchen's arm and persistently shouted, "Yuan Shurchen, hurry up and give me back my wine." Arbor couldn't stand it anymore. "All right, everyone has one." Everlasting Blade hurriedly left Shurchen behind and jogged over to Arbor. He beamed with joy and said, "Jojo, let me try it first." Mo Lien glanced at him and scolded him in her heart. What a glutton! Arbor handed Limitless Blade a pot and distributed the rest of the wine to everyone. Finally, he glanced at Sheng Chen, who was looking at him expectantly. "You brewed so many pots in the first batch." Miss Chiao glared at him angrily. Most of the peach blossom wine had been stolen by this guy, Yuan Shurchen. The remaining small portion had been distributed to everyone today. She only had 2 pots left. 2 pots. The winemaker had no wine to drink. How infuriating! Yuan Shurchen glanced at her listlessly. "My Jojo." Chapter 2171. Arbor's mouth twitched. He threw the last jug of wine to him and shouted, "Scram!" Hu Shurchen giggled, took the peach blossom wine, and hurriedly moved to the side. Prince Mo's face darkened as he looked Hu Shurchen up and down. This damned Hu Shurchen, she had already seen through Jojo's easily softened temperament. His wife was too popular, how could he get angry? Dao Wuji had already pulled out the cork of the wine jug. After taking a sip, his eyes suddenly lit up. "Little sister-in-law, you actually hid such good wine for so long. She should have taken it out and shared it earlier." Dao Wuji beat his chest and stamped his feet. Strange, why did he feel warm all over when the wine entered his stomach, and a subtle stream of Saint Power slowly flowed in his body? Hu Shurchen glanced at Dao Wuji with a smug look. "How is it? Do you feel it? This spiritual wine can stimulate the flow of Saint Power in the body. Are you surprised? Are you pleasantly surprised?" Seeing Hu Shurchen's smug expression, everyone couldn't help but grit their teeth. No wonder this kid secretly stole most of the peach blossom wine. It turned out that it could subtly stimulate the flow of Saint Power in the body. If they took it in the long run, it would probably be beneficial to their cultivation level. For people like them who had already entered the spiritual venerable realm and were in the immortal venerable realm, it was as difficult as ascending to heaven to raise their cultivation level by a small level. Now that they had taken a few sips of the peach blossom wine, it was beneficial to them. How could they not be surprised? I really like this little girl more and more. She's clever and clever, oha. I only hate that I wasn't born a man." Fairy Ginkgo's giggles attracted Prince Mo's cautious gaze. He suppressed it with a series of contemptuous looks. Fairy Ginkgo pursed her lips and stopped talking. As they were talking, Tong quickly came to Emolien with several hidden guards. Bowing, Tong quickly walked forward and said to Emolien in a low voice, "Your Highness, Madame Feng has made a move. Just now, she took dozens of people to the hillside outside the city." "How is the Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord?" Arbor quickly asked. When Madame Feng left, this subordinate searched the entire main residence, but did not find Manor Lord Gung. Could something have happened to that chatterbox, Dun Zhuang? Arbor thought in astonishment. Emolien's gaze landed on Arbor. "Jojo, do you want to go over and take a look?" "All right." Arbor nodded. "Since that's the case, let's go together." Fairy Ginkgo put away the smile on her face and said seriously, "Things might have changed." Little Taisui and the others nodded in agreement. Dun Zong is not an irresponsible person. Since he promised Jojo to stay in Shuntian Prefecture to be a good spy, it is impossible for him to disappear without any news. I'm guessing that Lady Feng must have seen through Dun Zhu's identity. Arbor frowned. "There's no time to lose. Let's set off immediately. Tong, lead the way." Tong immediately bowed. Turning around, he led several hidden guards and rushed out of the city. Everyone used their chi to fly. Their speed was not inferior to some ordinary flying mystic beasts. Xiao Xiao, you broke through to level 7 spiritual cultivator here last time. Mo Lien pointed at the mountain forest below them. At that time, it alarmed the entire Shuntian prefecture. People from all walks of life came to investigate. Arbor silently pointed at the sunken ground below. What happened there? So sleepy. I woke up to catch up. Chapter 2172. Mo Lien glanced at her in amusement. Then, holding her hand, the two of them landed on the square plateau. Apart from the rather high ground they were standing on, the surrounding terrain had sunk nearly half a meter. Here, you were sitting right here at the time. Mo Lien couldn't help but comment, even hubby is scared of your advancement. The result of all the spiritual aura gushing toward you is that the surroundings can't bear the burden. Other than the square inch you're sitting on, the ground within a radius of 1,000 feet has sunk because of you. Arbor expressionlessly turned her head away. Mo Lien was amused and pulled her small body back. Hubby saw it with his own eyes. Don't try to deny it. A perfectly fine mountain forest was turned into this by a little vandal like you. Little Taisui and the others also followed them to the sunken terrain. After studying it for a moment, they all turned to look at the expressionless Arbor. Arbor turned her head with a swish and asked Tong, who was standing nearby, "Have we arrived?" Reporting to the Crown Princess, Madame Nei Feng's destination is still some distance ahead. Arbor waved her hand with a taut expression. "Lead the way." Everyone couldn't resist snickering. The little stoic was too amusing. Every time they talked about a topic she didn't want to talk about, her small face would be especially taut. Tong hastily turned around to lead the way, leading everyone into the depths of the mountain forest. The deeper they went into the mountain forest, the more lush the trees became. Everyone gave up on flying and walked up the mountain on foot for about half an hour. From afar, they could see that the terrain had opened up slightly. After walking for another half an hour, Tong led everyone to a cliff entrance. He pointed below and said, "Madame Nei Feng led her people down from here." Everyone looked at each other in bewilderment. Arbor waved the fog in front of her and said aloofly, "The fog below is poisonous." Little Taisui and the others hastily retreated a few steps. Arbor took out several handmade antidote pills with special effects from her inner world and distributed them to everyone. "It looks like there are many poisonous insects and ants below. Be careful." Ordinary poisons were basically useless against them. Even so, Arbor still reminded them to be careful and not fail miserably. "Let's go down and take a look." Arbor and Mo Lien glanced at each other. Both of them raised their chi and flew down the cliff. Little Taisui and the others also followed behind. They controlled their speed and slowly made their way to the bottom of the cliff. He was surrounded by a thick layer of white fog, from which tiny water droplets constantly seeped out. However, since everyone had activated their defensive barriers, these small corrosive water droplets could not get close to them at all. The distance from the cliff to the bottom of the cliff was actually not too high. After everyone slowly swayed down, their eyes couldn't help but turn solemn. In front of them, there were countless palm-sized scorpions crawling back and forth. As if they had sensed the invasion of strangers, the black and red scorpions suddenly turned their heads and crawled toward their feet with rustling sounds. Arbor stood in front of everyone with a calm expression. He took out a small porcelain bottle from his inner world and poured out a lot of white powder. With a few sizzling sounds, all the poisonous scorpions that stepped on the white powder turned into black pus. It was a very shocking sight. They died without a complete corpse. Seeing how powerful the poison was, everyone couldn't help but jump in fright. This is a poison powder specially used to deal with poisonous creatures. Catching up on yesterday. Chapter 2173. Waiting at ease for an exhausted enemy was effortless. Arbor poured the white powder on the ground and drew a circle around everyone. The more poisonous the creature, the faster it will die after stepping on this powder. Arbor looked indifferently at the pitiful poisonous creatures that turned into black puddles after stepping on that white circle and surging toward them like a tide. Arbor wasn't idle either. She calmly took out several empty gourds from her inner world and collected the scorpion's poisonous blood on the ground. Everyone. They suddenly pitted these scorpions. What were they going to do? Leaving aside the fact that there were no corpses left, the little girl had to ruthlessly collect the remaining bit of blood essence. They didn't know who she would harm next time. The little girl was too savage. Arbor unhurriedly collected the scorpion's poisonous blood for about half a quarter of an hour. Everyone's eyes swept around, and they couldn't help but laugh out loud. Those slow-witted poisonous scorpions finally reacted. However, at this very moment, about 2/3 of their brothers and sisters were already dead. How would the several thousand poisonous scorpions dare to approach the remaining 1/3? They cowered and crawled backward with their heads tucked in. After a series of rustling sounds, the scorpions withdrew back into the sand and disappeared without a trace. Fairy Ginkgo had long been disgusted beyond words. Rubbing the small goosebumps on her arms, Fairy Ginkgo shuddered and asked, "These disgusting things, will they emerge from the sand again?" Although she was very clear in her heart that the scorpions would not be able to cross the white line that Jojo had drawn, she still felt extremely disgusted. She covered her body with 2 layers of defensive barriers, afraid that those ugly little things would come into contact with her delicate skin. "Don't worry." Arbor shook her head and said, "They've already run far away. Let's go." Emolien grasped the little fellow's small hand and pulled her forward. This valley didn't seem too big from the entrance, but the deeper they went, the deeper they felt. On both sides were cramped and towering cliffs, and a slender passageway led into the depths of the dense fog. The Ginkgo fairy and the peony fairy quickly followed behind the little stoic. Both of them nervously wore defensive shields, and they rubbed their arms from time to time. Arbor shouted, "Stop," from time to time. Then he walked to the side of the mountain and collected some moss, vines, small flowers, and all kinds of strange things. Sometimes, when she saw a half-lying, motionless lizard, she would use her silver needles to kill it. Then she would walk over expressionlessly, pick up the lizard, and bottle it. Everyone was speechless. Why did they feel that Xiao Xiao didn't seem to be taking a stroll in a dangerous poison garden? Instead, it was as if they had entered her amusement park. In her eyes, there were top-notch materials for making poison everywhere. Everyone's eyes twitched involuntarily. Sure enough, the little guy walked a few steps forward, squatted down, and fiddled with the soil. He pulled out a small twisting blue snake from the soil and glared at it threateningly. "Don't move." The little white snake originally coiled around her wrist also raised its round head and glared at the little blue snake to intimidate it. The little blue snake was scared silly. They didn't know if it was frightened by the little fellow or by the big boss on the little fellow's wrist. Its snake body hung down stiffly like a dead fish, stiff and motionless. Chapter 2174. Emolien and the rest looked at the snake sympathetically. The little fellow was quick to react and ruthless. She pried open the snake's mouth and gave it a warning glare. "Don't move, don't move. Everyone, . In the blink of an eye, Miss Qiao forcefully pulled out the 2 venomous fangs from the snake's mouth. It hurt so much. Everyone looked at the snake's contorted expression and sincerely shed tears of sympathy for it. Xiao Mu tossed away that blue snakelet. The little snake whimpered and wriggled its body, trying to escape. Arbor stepped on its tail. "Everyone, . Little fellow, you're too much." Arbor put the 2 venomous fangs into a small crystal bottle. After putting away the bottle, he squatted down and lifted the snake up. The snake was helpless. Its head tilted up slightly, and its eyes were filled with pitiful tears. "It's crying," Fairy Ginkgo exclaimed as if she had discovered a new continent. How could it not cry? Everyone looked at the cowardly little blue snake with great sympathy. "What are you crying for?" The little fellow slapped the snake's head and pried open its mouth again, sprinkling 2 drops of medicinal liquid into it. "It'll grow back in a month." "What a stupid snake, crying. Your 2 venomous fangs aren't growing well. Otherwise, How could they be pulled out so easily? Now that I've removed them before they're completely crooked, the ones that grow back in the future will be much sturdier than this. Arbor scolded the little snake to himself and threw it into the soil. The little blue snake, who had its fangs pulled out and was scolded as a pig, felt that it had never felt so wronged in its life. So wronged, it wriggled its slender little tail and was about to hurriedly burrow back into the soil when it suddenly saw Arbor take out a bottle of medicinal liquid from his sleeve and feed it to the big white snake on his wrist. What a sweet smell! The little blue snake paused and suddenly slithered towards Xiao Mu's feet with a rustle. Everyone thought, "You're courting death." The little blue snake slithered to Arbor's feet and suddenly collapsed on the ground in a very human-like manner. Then, its belly flipped, and it actually rolled towards the sky like a fish. It stuck out its belly and had a "please feed me" expression on its face. Everyone was speechless. Arbor glanced at it and said expressionlessly, "You can eat it if you want. In the future, I will offer a drop of venom essence every 3 months." The corner of Ma Shurchen's mouth twitched as she stole a glance at Emolien, who was standing beside her. He dared to bet his head with Emolien that the little fellow was definitely doing this on purpose. This little blue snake was definitely not an ordinary creature. Unfortunately, he was caught by Xiao Xiao today, even though he had been living in this poison valley for so many years. This is a blue spirit snake emperor. Arbor picked up the little blue snake, who was willing to sell himself because of his gluttony, and expressionlessly threw him back to the 100 Poison Valley on Paradise Planet. Although it is only a little snake at the peak of spiritual beast level, its venom is the most poisonous in the world. A drop of poison essence every 3 months was more than enough for her. The blue spirit snake emperor's venom was very malleable and could be made into all kinds of poisons. In the future, this venom would be very effective against great spiritual masters above level 10. Arbor turned around and looked at everyone. "What's with your expressions?" "And nothing." Fairy Ginkgo mumbled and closed her mouth. She secretly thought that the little blue snake was a little pitiful. Chapter 2175. Look, even after selling herself, she's still happily counting money for her master. Arbor glanced at them. Although no one said anything, their eyes were full of drama. Miss Qiao turned her head and continued walking forward. Everyone followed the thin and long path filled with thick fog. After walking for about half an hour, they saw a bright light in front of them. A row of bamboo houses was hidden in the fog. Looking at it, it was as if they were in a fairyland, the fog lingering around. Arbor blinked and looked up at Emolien. "Don't you feel that the way in has been very smooth?" Emolien nodded. "It's fine. Since the other party opened the door and let us in, let's see how capable this Madame Feng is." Arbor was naturally not afraid. Since Madame Feng dared to capture Dunzong, she had to be prepared to be uprooted. Moreover, she was also somewhat curious about Madame Feng's background. What kind of status did she have in the Tianyun organization? Hall Master? Or even higher? Arbor glanced over indifferently. He took out 2 small medicine bottles from his inner world and handed them to the Ginkgo Fairy and the Peony Fairy. "Apply this on your exposed skin. I guarantee that no poisonous insects will dare to approach you." Weren't they tired of keeping the defensive barrier open all day long? Keeping the barrier open also consumed spiritual energy. Oh no, they were consuming sacred energy. The 2 hurriedly took the medicine and removed the barrier after applying it. They looked around and saw that no poisonous creatures dared to approach them. Only then did they relax. Everyone walked towards the entrance of the bamboo house. At the same time, Dunzong, who was tied to an interrogation pillar, was cursing at Madame Feng. "Stop dreaming. A warrior prefers death to humiliation. I won't tell you who I am even if I die." It was really like a tiger being bullied by dogs. To think that he, a dignified venerable realm cultivator, was forced to be suppressed in Gung Pengcheng's small spirit realm body. He wanted to regain his previous cultivation and had to continue cultivating. The problem was that he needed time to train. Although he was already training as hard as he could, Gung Pengcheng's body was limited. The more he thought about it, the more pitiful he felt. He wanted to cry. Madame Feng's face darkened as she stood in front of Dunju. Seeing that he was about to cry again, she couldn't help but raise her hand and slap his face. "Shut up, you fierce woman. Bring me a whip. Wow. Don't hit me, don't hit me." The moment the whip came down, the stalks let out a heart-wrenching cry and a heart-rending scream. "Shut up," Madame Feng scolded angrily. Her face was slightly distorted. At this moment, the door of Nethery's room was pushed open. A woman who looked like a maid hurried over with her head lowered. She whispered to Madame Feng, "Madam, Hall Master Gong is here." Madame Feng frowned slightly. She handed the whip in her hand to the maidservant and said, "Continue." She turned around and walked out. Miserable screams rose again. As the door of Nethery's room slammed shut, Madame Feng raised her hand and rubbed the space between her eyebrows. Everything had been going wrong recently. After her stubborn disciple, Huang He, discovered her biggest secret, she wanted to get rid of Huang He but failed. What happened next was even more dramatic. She actually discovered that her husband seemed to have been replaced by someone else. This, Gung Pengcheng, in front of her was completely different from her husband in terms of temperament and behavior. Chapter 2176. Although he usually covered it up very well and could clearly describe many of the past events between them, he naturally couldn't match the small details. 2 days ago, Madame Feng was completely certain that the Gung Pengcheng in front of her had definitely been swapped. However, that person's skills were very good. The appearance did not change, but the heart was different. In other words, the original Gung Pengcheng's soul had probably dissipated long ago, and his spiritual consciousness had been destroyed. Although this man had never loved her from the beginning to the end, they had been husband and wife for so many years. It would be a lie to say that she did not regret it. If it were not for Gung Pengcheng, she would not have joined the organization and undergone such a drastic change. From a cripple in the past, she had become a person with special abilities. Her life had completely changed. Although Gung Pengcheng usually treated her with respect, as a husband, he had performed quite well. When they were outside, he gave her enough face as his wife. In the manner, he also never allowed those concubines to suppress her. After decades of being together, he left just like that. It would be a lie to say that she did not regret it. After old Gung left, Madame Feng felt as if a knife had been twisted in her heart for the past few days. It turned out that there were many things that she did not know when she was together. Only when she lost him would she know that the other party was not that unimportant to her. It did not matter that her husband did not love her. At least he was still with her. But now, there was nothing left. Madame Feng clenched her fists tightly and quickly walked into the hall. The hall was very dark and secluded. On the 4 walls, there were wooden decorations such as ox-headed and horse-faced malicious ghosts hanging. Each of them was described as terrifying. A tall and slightly thin young man was standing in the hall with his back facing her. He slowly turned his head. His face was covered with a ghost mask, and his scarlet ghost eyes were staring at her. Madame Feng's heart skipped a beat. She quickly bowed and respectfully called out, "Hall Master Gong." A low and hoarse roar came from behind Hall Master Gong. A figure suddenly appeared beside her like lightning and reached out to grab her neck. Madame Feng was shocked. She only felt that the hand that grabbed her seemed to be very strong. She forced herself to raise her neck and look at the person who came. She saw a woman with a slightly ashen face and veins on her face. She was bared her teeth and glared at her fiercely. That face was not the face of a normal human. The woman's hair had been shaved clean, and her bald head was covered with ferocious veins. A left hand was gripping her neck, and the strength was so great that she couldn't move at all. "Chief Gong," Madame Feng said with difficulty. "Ali," the man called out faintly. The bald woman named Ali suddenly threw Madame Feng away. Madame Feng was sent flying back more than a meter before falling heavily to the ground. She lay on the ground and gasped for air. Hiding the fear in her eyes, she raised her head with difficulty and glanced at Hall Master Gong. She quickly lowered her head and said respectfully, "Hall Master, please spare my life. Hall Master, please spare my life." "Feng Lan." Hall Master Gong looked at her coldly and said, Do you know where you went wrong? Madame Feng lowered her head and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. You've greatly disappointed the Lord. Hall Master Gong sneered. Your impatience has ruined the Lord's plans. Now that those people have found their way here, what are you going to do? A cold and bloody smile appeared on Feng Lan's face. Chapter 2177. Kill them and make sure they don't return. With just you? Humiliation flashed through Feng Lan's eyes. She raised her head and said with a twisted expression, Of course, it's not just me. There are also the 100,000 mystic cultivators under my command. Your subordinates? Yes, Master's subordinates. Master didn't have you nurture these people for you to squander as you wish. Feng Lan silently lowered her head. Everyone thought that Geng Pengcheng had a very powerful private army under his command, but they didn't know that this private army was actually collected and nurtured by her master. They directly obeyed her master, but she had the authority to mobilize them. But Hall Master Gong said she couldn't abuse this authority to mobilize troops. Feng Lan was naturally unconvinced. If she didn't mobilize these troops, how could she deal with those people from Arbor? How could she avenge her husband? At this moment, she didn't know that Geng Pengcheng's original body had died in Arbor's hands. She only vaguely felt that this matter probably had something to do with that stoic-faced little girl. But now Hall Master Gong actually issued such an order? Feng Lan, it's best if you don't act on your own, Hall Master Gong said to her coldly. Hand over the transfer order for the Shuntian guards. Madame Nei Feng silently clenched her fists. Unexpectedly, she heard an inhuman roar coming from behind Hall Master Gong. Madame Nei Feng's heart tightened. She looked up at the bald woman standing a few steps behind Hall Master Gong, her palms sweating. This woman's strange appearance made her wonder who she was. Madame Nei Feng broke out in cold sweat and thought, she doesn't look human, but her appearance is infinitely close to a human's. Could it be? Madame Nei Feng's eyes almost completely lit up. Hall Master, could it be B? It's a perfect zombie. Hall Master Gong sneered coldly. Do you think her appearance is perfect? This was far from a perfect zombie, okay? Her evolution failed. She's now a rank 1 special grade zombie. Hall Master Gong swept a glance at the bald woman and said coldly, she can't even advance to rank 2. Such good resources spent on her have been wasted. The bald woman lowered her head in defeat. This expression? This greatly surprised Madame Feng. She hurriedly said, Hall Master, has she completely awakened her spiritual intelligence? Of course, Hall Master Gong said coldly. This rank 1 special zombie puppet possessed the memories of its human predecessor. Not only had she fully awakened her intelligence, she was basically no different from a human. However, Hall Master Gong frowned as he looked at the bald woman's appearance. He shook his head and said, a failed product is ultimately a failed product. If he advanced to the second stage, the veins on his skin should recede, and his appearance would be no different from that of an ordinary person. But now, the bald woman would definitely give people the impression that she was not one of them at first glance. Unfortunately, he was only one small step away. Hall Master Gong sighed and gestured for the bald woman to take a few steps back. He walked over to Madame Feng, raised his hand and said coldly, hand it over. The transfer order of the Shuntian Sentinels was a private army that she had painstakingly cultivated for so many years. Madame Feng gritted her teeth and took out a transfer order from her inner world with trembling hands. She bowed and handed it to Hall Master Gong. Hall Master, Madame Feng called out submissively, I will bring these people away. Hall Master Gong swept a glance at Madame Feng. Chapter 2178. I'll give you one last piece of advice. There are some enmity that you can't avenge. You can still survive if you leave as soon as possible. Now isn't the best time to clash head-on with Arbor's group. His lord has ordered not to clash head-on with them. Why? Feng Lan raised her head and questioned loudly. She could sense that Hall Master Gong's aura had also sunk slightly, as if he was very unhappy. Feng Lan, pay attention to your status. Weigh clearly what you should and shouldn't ask. Hall Master Gong coldly glanced at her and turned to leave with a flick of his sleeve. Suddenly, a female attendant hurriedly ran in and hastily saluted Hall Master Gong and Feng Lan. "Madam, it's bad. That Miss Chiao has led a group of people into our valley. Now that they've entered the bamboo hut and discovered that there was no one there, they're looting our supplies." Feng Lan clenched her fists and glared at Hall Master Gong, who was watching coldly from the sidelines. "Hall Master, that girl is so arrogant and despotic. Why do we have to tolerate her so much? This is an order from above. Just do as you're told." Hall Master Gong turned around and walked 3 steps before coldly glancing at the bald woman beside him. "Ali, why aren't you leaving?" That bald woman called Ali was like a mechanical puppet. She desperately wanted to turn around and leave with the Hall Master, but her body seemed to be out of her control and didn't move at all. Hall Master Gong sneered, "A defective product is a defective product. You can't control your body again? Take her away." The 2 subordinates following behind him immediately walked forward and lifted Ali from both sides. They directly carried her away as if she was a clay sculpture. This was completely the posture of moving goods. The bald woman was already sane, so this posture caused a great sense of shame to rise in her heart. "Hall Master Gong." Feng Lan couldn't resist raising her voice and called out to the Hall Master wearing a ghost mask. "Don't tell me we're abandoning this base? What else?" Hall Master Gong coldly glanced at Feng Lan. "If you didn't act rashly and alert the enemy in your eagerness for instant success and startle that girl, would we have completely retreated now?" Feng Lan couldn't resist grinding her teeth. "I don't understand. With his lord's power, couldn't he just kill that little stoic? She's just a little girl from the lower star region. Could it be that Arbor has some unknown identity?" Hall Master Gong coldly glanced at Feng Lan. "Don't act on your own. I'm warning you for the last time, no." Of course. How pretentious. Hall Master Gong said coldly. When Hall Master Gong finished speaking and turned around, he suddenly heard a violent roar from the side. His expression changed and he turned his head away. Suddenly, the bald woman seemed to have gone mad. She actually dashed towards the female attendant. The female attendant let out a cry of alarm. She was suddenly knocked backwards by her and fell to the ground with a bang. Hall Master Gong angrily shouted, "Ali!" However, the bald woman didn't listen to his command at all. She roared and ran outside. Feng Lan was startled for a moment, then her face lit up with joy. This special-grade corpse puppet had already developed intelligence, and it even had the memories of a human when it was alive. She went crazy when she heard Arbor's name, so it looked like she definitely had an irreconcilable grudge with this little stoic. Roar, roar, roar. The bald female corpse puppet called Ali grimaced in pain and dashed out madly without a care. It was too late for Hall Master Gong to send people to intercept her. Chapter 2179. Damn it. Hall Master Gong shouts angrily and turns his head to look at the 2 subordinates who were carrying the bald woman. "Are you all dead? Why aren't you going to stop her?" The 2 subordinates complain incessantly in their hearts. This rank 1 special class zombie has boundless strength and incomparably fast speed. It really isn't something that 2 little spirit masters can deal with. They don't know what's wrong with this fellow. It suddenly goes crazy and makes people unable to guard against it. Although they are constantly cursing in their hearts, the 2 of them don't dare to say anything. Since it's the Hall Master's order, they quickly follow and prepare to stop the bald woman. However, when they rush out, they can't find any trace of the bald woman. That bald woman's speed is much faster than theirs. In the time it takes to say a few words, she has already flown off to God knows where. Meanwhile, Xiao Mu and the others had ransacked that row of bamboo houses from top to bottom, inside and out. With the mentality of not wasting anything that can be used, everyone puts everything they see into their inner worlds. The Peony Fairy even says in a deadpan manner, "I didn't expect that our trip to this small valley would actually have some gains. This is really unexpected. There are a lot of spirit stones piled up in this bamboo house. He Chen and the others don't need them, so Arbor takes them all." In the end, looking at some sturdy wooden tables and chairs in the bamboo house, Arbor thinks that when there are more people in the future, he will build his own small house on Paradise Planet. His family will also need these things, so he puts them all in one go. Everyone looks at her as if they are looking at a god. Wherever this little fellow passed by, not a single strand of hair was left behind. After sweeping through this row of bamboo houses, everyone has some gains. For example, Ginkgo Fairy and the others took a batch of pretty good medicinal pills. Arbor doesn't really need these medicinal pills and the like. If she wants them, she can just refine them herself. Another example is that some of the spirit tools stored in the bamboo house were taken away by Dao Wuji. This brat plans to listen to little sister-in-law's words. In the future, when he fights, he won't waste his strength if he can get spirit tools to explode. When everyone comes out of the bamboo house, they all have a lot of gains. Just as they are about to continue walking inside, they suddenly hear a low and hoarse roar. Roar, roar, roar. Xiao Mu abruptly turned her head, and the first thing she saw was a large bald head with countless veins protruding from it. So ugly! Xiao Mu creased her brows and decisively swept her palm across. The wood's spiritual energy that he pushed out endlessly pressed forward and heavily struck the bald woman's face that was pouncing towards him. Pang! The bald woman dodged as fast as lightning. Arbor's attack missed and smashed into the ground behind the bald woman. The broken gravel immediately splashed out, and some dust flew in front of their eyes. Everyone subconsciously narrowed their eyes. Roar! Roar! The bald woman stared straight at Arbor. Her purplish-red lips wriggled, and she shouted hoarsely and strenuously, "Joe!" Her voice was very strange. It sounded like a human, but it wasn't. It took her a lot of effort to say the two simple words, Arbor. Arbor looked at her coldly and sized her up. He frowned and said, "Corpse puppet?" What? Dao Wuji looked over in shock. When he saw her just now, he thought that this bald woman was just a little ugly. He didn't expect that Jojo would call her a corpse puppet. Broken dreams. Chapter 2180. Mo Lien also furrowed her brows. It did appear to be a zombie, and it was a zombie in a complete human form. Her appearance was not good-looking, and her expression was slightly stiff. But compared to those crooked and rotting zombies in the past, this one was clearly very outstanding. However, why did this human-shaped zombie suddenly dash out from behind the bamboo house and attack Jojo without any explanation? She seemed to know Jojo and even called out her name. But it was clear that the husband and wife did not know who this bald woman was. The peony fairy blocked the attack and turned back to shout, "Hey, Jojo, this zombie seems to be coming for you." Arbor nodded. She could naturally tell that this human-shaped zombie had clearly called out her name just now. Moreover, the hatred in this bald woman's eyes was very bone-piercing. The bald woman hated her? But she had no recollection of it at all. She did not even know when she had interacted with this bald woman. Roar, roar. The bald woman clenched her fists tightly. Her finger bones appeared very thick, and her hands were 2 to 3 times larger than normal women's hands. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that her hands were covered in a thick layer of calluses that were many times thicker than other people's hands. Although her body no longer rotted after the mutation, she was still so ugly. Jojo! The bald woman shouted menacingly and abruptly dashed toward Arbor. She swung out her arms, which abruptly turned into slender noodles, and slapped at Arbor's head. Seeing this, Mo Lien promptly threw out a purple flame and hugged Arbor to the side. "Wife, don't be scared, don't be scared." Mo Lien calmly rubbed the little fellow's chest. "Hubby is here." Arbor, ? Jojo was not scared at all, okay? Hubby was taking advantage of her, right? Ciao. The bald woman's resentful voice rang out again, and her scarlet eyes stared fixedly at Arbor and Mo Lien. Kill. The bald woman spat out these 3 words with great effort. Her 2 long arms swung in the air and attacked in the direction of Arbor again. Squawk. The bald woman let out an extremely unpleasant roar, and 2 short black wings suddenly sprouted from her back. Squawk, squawk. The bald woman flew into the air and looked down at the ground fiercely. She flapped her short wings and swooped down from a height of 100 meters. She looked like she was going to throw Arbor to the ground and tear it apart. I wonder what level this corpse puppet is? The peony fairy said with a strange expression. It seems that it has evolved to a certain extent. Compared to the little monsters we saw before, this zombie can fly and mutate parts of its body. She doesn't seem like a high-level zombie. While everyone was discussing, the purple flames in Emolien's hands had already built a high defensive wall of fire in front of the two of them. When the bald woman swooped down, she crashed into the flames. Immediately, she screamed in pain and subconsciously retreated. Kill them. Don't leave a single one alive. Madame Nei Feng rushed forward with several hundred personal guards and bellowed while pointing at Arbor and the others. Several hundred spiritual cultivators rushed forward, but before they could get close to Arbor and Emolien, they were stopped by little Tai Sui and the others. Chapter 2181. What? You want to win with numbers? Dao Wuji chuckled and summoned his large saber from his consciousness. He slung it over his shoulder. Come. Grandpa will play with you. A spirit master around 40 years old coldly glanced at Dao Wuji. He stomped on the ground and shot toward Dao Wuji. Originally, Xiaochen thought that he would be able to send Dao Wuji flying with this punch. But unexpectedly he was bounced back in the same way he had charged over. His speed was twice as fast as before. His entire body tumbled as he was struck by Dao Wuji's punch. His mouth and nose were bleeding, and he howled as he was sent flying. Hundreds of spirit masters' expressions darkened. They looked at Dao Wuji as if they were facing a great enemy. They knew that brother's cultivation very well. He was a rank 7 spirit master, but he couldn't even last one move against this pretty boy. Go! A spirit master clenched his teeth. He waved his hand and everyone rushed forward to attack little Tai Sui and the others. A few of them even looked around and set their sights on Arbor, who was idly watching from the side. Arbor was standing behind Emolien's defensive wall of fire. He coldly watched the bald woman swoop back and forth in the air, trying to break through Emolien's defensive wall of fire. Unexpectedly, the sound of wind whistling could be heard in his ears. Emolien didn't even turn her head. Several black lotus seals flew out with a flick of her finger. She didn't even look at them and directly shot toward the sneak attackers. As soon as the black lotus seal came into contact with the skin of the sneak attackers, it immediately burst open, and a thick layer of black fog instantly swallowed the attackers. Faint cries of struggle came from the depths of the black fog. In the blink of an eye, those people had already transformed into ashes and completely vanished into thin air. The group of spirit masters who turned around to look at them couldn't help but shudder violently when they saw this. Their eyes were slightly frightened as they looked at the ruthless young man. These people looked so young. Unexpectedly, their cultivations were much higher than theirs. At this moment, these spirit masters couldn't help but feel some regret in their hearts. If Madame Feng had not promised them great benefits, how could they have disobeyed Hall Master Gong's orders and recklessly followed Madame Feng's orders? At the same time, the man wearing the devil mask was coldly looking at a maid who was kneeling on the ground and trembling slightly. You said that Madame Feng led more than 500 people over? The maid nodded vigorously. Hall Master, Madam didn't do it on purpose? Not on purpose? Hall Master Gong sneered. She went against her master's orders and made a decision on her own. I think she must have been used to living like a princess for so many years that she forgot her true identity. She was just a dog that the master had taken in. She was so disobedient and even wanted to betray the master. This ambitious woman, as the master had said, could not be kept. Hall Master, what about Ali? Although our people have rushed over, Ali's strength and speed are extraordinary. We may not be able to suppress her. Hall Master Gong coldly looked outside the hall. He could occasionally hear the sounds of fighting and killing coming from outside. Let's go. The subordinate's expression suddenly froze. Let's go? Could it be that Hall Master Gong wanted to give up on the special class corpse puppet? However, it wasn't just a matter of time for a special class corpse puppet to take shape. Chapter 2182. This still required the investment of a large amount of manpower and resources. How could he give up on such a meticulous nurturing just like that? Hallmaster Gong was truly generous. It's just a disobedient pet, Hallmaster Gong said coldly and waved his hand. In any case, it's just trash. It doesn't matter. Since that's the case, Hallmaster, should we evacuate the Shantian guards now? Hallmaster Gong nodded. Go ahead. You take them away first. Hallmaster, it's bad. When Hallmaster Gong heard the voice, his brows involuntarily creased. He looked up coldly at the slightly plump middle-aged man who barged in. Wu Meng, how many times have I told you? Don't be so alarmed when something happens. Sorry, Hallmaster. The plump middle-aged man swayed his body and giggled foolishly. What happened? Hallmaster Gong asked coldly. Hallmaster. The corpse poison in the Shantian guards suddenly flared up and bit everyone they saw. Now, the number of people affected has spread to more than 10,000. Although the fat man had a silly look on his face, his words were like beans pouring out of a bamboo tube. He spoke very quickly and in a very organized manner. Therefore, Hallmaster Gong's face turned green when he heard this person's report. Feng Lan, you're indeed gutsy, feigning compliance on the surface but opposing on the inside. Hallmaster Gong gnashed his teeth and sneered. He raised his hand and said angrily, What are you still standing there for? Quickly evacuate the unharmed members of the Shantian guards. Hallmaster, this matter is still rather difficult, Wu Meng hurriedly said. Wu Meng hurriedly said, although our people went over to control it, the corpse poison acted up very quickly. Once bitten, the person will immediately turn into a corpse within a quarter of an hour. Hallmaster Gong clenched his fists tightly. It should be the corpse poison of the special-grade zombie we left behind. They were originally only used for small-scale experiments, but they didn't expect the deranged Feng Lan to throw them into the Shantian guards. Could it be that the Shantian guards, which had 100,000 mystic cultivators and 1,000 spiritual cultivators, would be completely assimilated into a chaotic zombie army? That damned Feng Lan. She didn't hesitate to do this for her own selfish desires. It was him who underestimated a woman's hatred. Branch Master Gong tightened the obsidian bracelet on his wrist and subconsciously moved the round black stone. Damn it. Hallmaster? Should we go out and take a look? Hallmaster Gong shook his head. If we go and see Feng Lan now, she will only be more pleased with herself. Quickly bring some people over and bring out those Shantian guards who have not yet been infected. Hallmaster, what if we make a mistake and bring out those infected with corpse poison and mix them into the normal group? What should we do then? Hallmaster Gong's head was about to explode. At this moment, he felt like his head was about to explode. When he heard his subordinates say such words, he couldn't help but be angry. Then open your eyes and take a good look before you speak. After he finished speaking, he waved his hand and asked them to scram. He walked back and forth in the hall a few times before he reached out and took out a communication jade talisman from his inner world. He reported everything that had happened here, including Feng Lan's disloyalty and corpse puppet Ali's disobedience to his command to his master. Soon, the other party replied with a line of words, abandon all of them. This meant that he didn't want the mutated Shantian guards either. Branch Master Gong glanced at the transfer order for the Shantian guards in his hand and couldn't help but sneer. Bang! He smashed the transfer order into pieces. Chapter 2183. As though he still couldn't vent his anger, Hallmaster Gong ruthlessly stomped on the shard again. Feng Lan thought she had won, but she would soon realize that she had utterly lost. The little stoic wasn't that easy to deal with. Naive. Besides, Master wouldn't let this matter pass so easily. Only death awaited Feng Lan. At this time, outside the bamboo building, the battle between Arbor's group and the bald woman and Feng Lan's group was nearing its end. From beginning to end, the bald woman hadn't been able to take a single step past the lightning bolt. She could only glare furiously and madly at Arbor through the defensive firewall as she cursed. However, her curses seemed to be stuck in her throat, making it completely indiscernible. It was extremely strenuous for her to even pronounce the two words, Arbor, let alone curse normally. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at this person. He only felt that the veins on that woman's bald head were bulging one by one. As far as the eye could see, they looked like earthworms twisting crookedly on her head, making him instinctively feel extremely disgusted. Roar! The bald woman roared at the sky in extreme grief and indignation. She pounced down again and again, crashing into Emolien's defensive fire barrier. As a result, she was flung back again and again. She was covered in cuts and bruises, but she still couldn't break through the defensive wall. Her furious gaze landed on Emolien, and she roared at Emolien for a while. Emolien simply didn't know what this person was roaring about. He only lowered his head to check on his wife's body. Are you frightened? My Jojo, don't look at such an ugly thing. It stings your eyes. Arbor patted his chest. I'm not scared at all. At least, her appearance isn't much different from a normal person's. It's better than those zombies that shed rotten flesh as they run, right? Fuck, the zombies that shed rotten flesh as they run are here. Dao Wuji's ghostly wails and howls came from the other end. Arbor's mouth twitched as he turned around to take a look. His eyeballs nearly popped out. Was this really true? All of a sudden, the back of the row of bamboo houses began to swarm. One after another, graceful zombies emerged from the back of the bamboo houses and lunged at little Taisui and the others. Jojo bro jinxed it. Oh my, you scared this little sister to death. Fairy Ginkgo stretched out 2 fingers and gently patted her chest. In the blink of an eye, she savagely beat the few corpse puppets that had pounced over into pieces and rolled on the ground. Peony's movements were even more swift. She directly smashed down several lightning bolts, turning several corpses that were squeezed together into a pile of charred bones. Ma Shurchin laughed and said, "It's over, the entire mountain is covered with corpse puppets. Where did so many zombies come from?" Little Taisui also furrowed his brows. 100,000 Shantian guards? No way. Endless Blade immediately cried out exaggeratedly, talent. Could it be that they turned the 100,000 Shantian guards into corpse puppets because they wanted to deal with us? Oh wait, the Feng family is here, and a swarm of corpse puppets has appeared among the Shantian guards. Could it be that these Shantian guards aren't Gung Pengcheng's private army, but rather a team assembled by the Feng family? Everyone looked at Endless Blade with measuring eyes. Heavens, Endless Blade could actually come up with such an analysis. This was the first time this had ever happened. Everyone revealed expressions of admiration and looked Endless Blade up and down again. Arbor also glanced at Endless Blade, giving him a look that said, "This child is worth teaching. This brother's IQ is finally online." Chapter 2184. Yuan Shurchin was not stingy with her praise. It's rare to see you so smart. You must have paid a lot of attention to improving your brain recently. It's good to improve your brain. Little Taisui chimed in. Since it's so effective, remember to improve your brain often in the future. Don't make it worse. Fuck you. Dao Wuji glared at Yuan Shurchin in annoyance, then glared at little Taisui. It's rare for me to be wise, but there are so many people who can't stand to see me doing well and are mocking me. What the hell is going on? Dao Wuji rolled his eyes and glared back at them one by one. I'll take out a small notebook later and write them down one by one. In the future, I'll mock them back. Everyone looked at the endless stream of zombies and charged forward with their sabers. This time, they had to be serious. Feng Lan looked on coldly for a while. Seeing that the bald woman who had been hovering in the air was unable to break through Prince Mo's defense line, she couldn't help but frown. This young couple was really detestable. Feng Lan waved her hand, and 4 or 5 maids immediately came over with a cart of spiritual energy balls. They put 3 or 4 spiritual energy balls into something that looked like a small catapult and aimed it in the direction of Emolien and Arbor. A chilly glint leaked out of Feng Lan's eyes. Xiao Mu, was it you people who harmed my husband and stole his soul? With a flick of Xiao Mu's finger, several hundred defensive talismans made from ebony flew out. They circled around Emolien's defensive firewall and tightly encircled the firewall, adding 2 layers of protection. Feng Lan questioned sternly, "What? You dare to do it but don't dare to admit it?" "Why wouldn't I dare to admit it?" Arbor sneered. "You reap what you sow. Geng Pengcheng sent people to trick me and assassinate me many times. Why can't I retaliate? Am I a pitiful little girl who can be beaten and scolded? Is it my fault that I resisted?" Feng Lan stared at her with a pale face and anxiously cursed, "Old Geng has never met you before. Why did he?" Halfway through her words, Feng Lan paused as a faint light of understanding flashed in her eyes. "What's your relationship with Long Chuyun? Are you?" Arbor's expression changed. Just as he was about to fly out of the defensive layer, Emolien suddenly reached out and hugged him tightly. "Don't be fooled. This woman is trying to lure you over." Emolien looked at Feng Lan indifferently, a trace of coldness flashing in her eyes. "It doesn't matter if you don't say it. We can probably guess it. Although the Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord married you, he probably never had you in his heart." "You're talking nonsense." Feng Lan's face instantly twisted. Emolien was actually just bluffing her a little, but who would have thought that Feng Lan would be duped by him at once? Hence, he had a better grasp of the situation. He looked at Madame Nei Feng with a sneer and said, "Your husband has someone else in his heart. That person should be a member of the Mu clan, right?" Feng Lan's pupils almost shrank. What kind of emotion could make a person willingly self-detonate their spiritual conscience in order to keep the secret with them? Emolien smiled faintly as he sized up the pale-faced Feng Lan. "I can understand Prefecture Lord Geng's actions very well. In this world, only true love can make a man willingly go to such lengths." That you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.